came to me, she said, Dad, you're going to have real problems at the foundation because it's one of the 2 or 3 fastest growing foundations in America, and you only have 6% overhead. I said, that's good, isn't it? I like flat management styles, no bureaucracy. She said, yeah, it is, but you can't even afford a decent human resource department. If you're going to have, a couple thousand employees all over the world and you're selling AIDS drugs in 70 countries, you have to build a modern organization. You're going to have to spend some time on it and convince somebody to give you the money to do that too. Or you just can't run something this big with like no overhead. She said, I know you like doing it all every day and keeping up with everything, you can't do it. And she basically saved us. She modernized the whole thing and convinced us to do it and did a lot of other things. And one of the things she didn't say, she has written 4 best-selling children's books, but she also co-wrote with a young Indian-American woman from Miami who was the youngest Rhodes Scholar ever. She was a Rhodes Scholar at 18. And they wrote a book, the first book ever really written on the global public health system, how it's funded and everything, and it's dense and it's not going to ever be a bestseller, but it is a bestseller in public health programs all over the world because somebody needs to know whether all this money the United States gives to the World Health Organization is being well spent, or are we saving a maximum amount of lives? And the last thing I want to flack for her because her last book, which came out last week, is about endangered species for children. It says, don't let them disappear. And it describes big animals that are endangered.
Howdy, y'all. It's me, Bubba. Won't you help me save the cheaters? Well, Charles, we're perhaps guilty of recycling a cheater animation, but I think people needed to hear Bill Clinton talking about what a good job he's doing selling pharmaceuticals.
It's very clear. I mean, there have been many vignettes and comments over the years that of insiders of the Clinton Foundation admitting that basically Bill just did whatever he wanted to do. I think in one of Ed Klein's books, talking about the Clinton Foundation, Ed says that Bill was in a jovial mood, who knows why, and he just said it, a blast email to everybody at the foundation. Take your girlfriend or boyfriend out for dinner on the foundation. It's on me.
What?
That was in Ed Klein's book. Yeah, one of his books, something like that.
Is that charity as well?
That's not charity. And so, I mean, listening, when you look at Bill Clinton, and I'm sure he's even now a skilled politician. One thing is very clear. This man knows absolutely nothing about business. I mean, it's just ridiculous what he was saying.
6% overhead, isn't that good?
Because I'm selling drugs. I mean, we've got people all over the world selling drugs in a charity. The basic problem that I've had all along from the very beginning, forgetting the fact that this entity was never supposed to do any work outside of not just Little Rock, but a certain portion of Little Rock where the city of Little Rock had deeded or had taken control of land and leased it to the foundation outside of that park in Little Rock. That was supposed to be a presidential park, against which there are bonds still outstanding that were sold to the public under the theory that proceeds would be used so that this thing would remain in Little Rock, doing work in Little Rock. This guy's saying, no, I don't want to go back to Little Rock. We moved to New York. Hillary's representing New York. I like the restaurants here in New York.
Right.
I like the mansion down there in Washington, D.C. I can't be bothered with going back to Little Rock. I want to sell drugs around the world.
Right.
And
well, he's got a lot of experience with that. Started in MENA with H.W. Bush, and now they're just moving on to Africa or whatever.
Right. And so when you listen to that, I've been troubled all along. Let's give him the theory, which I don't admit in a real debate, but just for the moment, let's give them the theory that they could in fact maybe try to do this around the world. In order to stay within the charter of doing it as a charity, there would have to be real charitable aspects to giving these drugs. Just because you elect to use a generic replacement for a branded drug, and the generic sells at whatever its price is, which is a lot less than the branded version, there's nothing charitable about that. It's like when you go into CVS or whatever and you buy some drug you may need, should you write it down as a tax deduction that you pick generic as opposed to the branded version? No. The charitable distribution of drugs would be going and doing a deal with a manufacturer and saying, listen, you're going to lose money on every one of these drugs, and you're going to do this happily because we're going to promote you, as a great global citizen. And even that might not actually be a charitable activity. But to just go and open a window around the world, given your globalist ties to the World Health Organization and other people, to allow these crooked, as it turns out, Indian generic manufacturers to get into big markets, South Africa, other places, where they had been denied entry, that's business development. Right. And if on top of that, your daughter, who you're flacking for even now, on a book tour or whatever this thing is, your daughter got the benefit of getting a job at McKinsey, and then she got another benefit of getting all these book contracts. I mean, what does she know about global health?
He didn't mention the diarrhea book.
He did. It's a funny thing that.
It's the best-selling diarrhea book ever.
And the book, that's right. And the book that they're talking about, remember, we reviewed that. I read that book. It's horrible. It's a joke. I mean, the title of it is Governing Global Health.
Right.
The basic concept is ridiculous. And it makes me wonder how they plucked this young Indian American out of obscurity and made her a Rhodes Scholar at 18.
Yeah.
Why did they do it at 12? Because the notion that you're going to govern a global health system when there are no doctors in many portions of the world, no nurses, no hospitals, no reliable electricity, no clean water, is a ridiculous idea. You should be focusing on, before we get to healthcare in some of these countries, you might want to think about, should there actually be maybe, let's say, an electrical plant so you can distribute electricity around, or maybe there should be some roads so that if people get sick and you want to get them to the hospital, they don't end up at the bottom of a 20-foot sinkhole in the middle of the capital city.
Perhaps there's a mobile phone and data network a friend of theirs could take over.
Exactly.
There's a lot of things to get to before you start selling drugs to the people. Charles, I got to tell you, that event was just off the rails. There were so many things they said. I was like trying to keep my mouth zipped. And, I didn't want to put it on YouTube because it seems like the type of thing that the Clintons might put a YouTube strike on, so people can watch it on patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. And again, if the Clintons think I've violated some sort of copyright or something, they're welcome to bring legal action against Crowdsource the Truth. I'd be quite interested to get into court and ask them about the legality of getting up there and lying to everybody for, the tickets were like $750 and, ridiculous huge sums. I got mine at a discount at the last minute on StubHub when I heard that Howie Kaplan was going to be there, basically trolling our friend Bill. But it's not trolling. Howard Kaplan goes there and he stands up and says, listen, enough of this lying about nonsense. He said, Bill, this is boring. I want to hear about Jeffrey Epstein. This is a legitimate question to ask.
Right.
What was he doing on that jet 26 times, and why are there all these allegations from women now who say when they were girls, 14 and whatever, 14, 15, 16, they're accusing various people of rape. Why is Bill Clinton not answering these questions? And why is Howie Kaplan getting manhandled and thrown out of the place for raising awareness about this? People were delusional in that place. And I'm going to put another clip on Twitter maybe later today or later this week where a psychotic, sycophantic, Democratic Clintonista literally assaulted me, grabbed my arm, a woman grabbed the phone out of my hands, and this wasn't a security guard. This was someone who didn't like it that I went up to the stage after the show and Bill was shaking hands and said, how is selling pharmaceuticals charity?
Did you ever get an answer out of Bill?
Well, here's what happened. When the woman pulled the phone out of my hands, it stopped recording. You squeeze the side of the iPhone and it turns off. And then I think Bill saw when the phone, because he was ignoring me at first, and after this woman pulled the phone out of my hand and I started screaming at her to give me my phone back, she stole it, she was going to take it. Then Bill started shouting an answer at me and I couldn't hear what he said. But Mr. Clinton, if you're watching, you can call in and maybe after Dr. Corsi comes on the show, we can have Bill Clinton answer that question.
That's right.
I somehow feel like he won't do that.
Or the diarrhea queen. Chelsea.
Exactly, Chelsea could call as well.
Yeah.
But we do have Dr. Corsi coming on at 4, Charles, so perhaps we should get right into the slides.
Well, okay, I was going to congratulate the art department yet again.
Well, hey, I'll take some accolades. Let me do a victory lap.
You should do many.
This is a good one.
Came together so well, Jason. And for the fine points of this for me, as somebody who knows nothing about design and art, it's just so cool how you wove in the Hillary motto twice, and there's Paul Begala basically holding her head, and I got to say, increasingly it looks to me as if her head is barely attached to the rest of her body. It's like there's something very odd at the picture that you put up there in the audience when she was on stage. Who selected that outfit for her?
Well, apparently her head actually was attached during the video because I didn't affect the video at all. But this is obviously a photo composite of her head. I didn't know who this guy, Paul Begala, was before I went there. And I still don't know who he is. But he said some really objectionable things.
He's a longtime suck up to the Clintons.
And of course, Bernie is sick and tired of her damn emails.
Good, because we're sick and tired of you. And I love the way his shirt is basically turning green.
Well, we should also add, this episode was going to be titled Weekend at Bernie's and talk all about newly minted millionaire Bernie Sanders, talking about how he's going to reveal his taxes. But that was quickly pushed aside by what everyone is confused about with regard to this WikiLeaks dump that either is a new bunch of emails or isn't a new bunch of emails. We'll get into that.
We'll cover that. And then also this picture of Obama's priceless, because I think his experience, we'll never know the inside story perhaps of what it was like when he was president, but he had Valerie Jarrett, it would seem, making a lot of calls for him. You have, and we're going to talk about it, disparaging comments that were basically covered up coming from the Clinton camp and many others. And, while he was there, he was always talking about his legacy, and I don't think there's much left of that legacy already.
Scandal-free.
Yeah, the scandal-free presidency. And he's got to be sitting there going, I can't believe this. Why didn't she campaign in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania? What are we going to do now? This is not a slow motion train wreck coming. This is a high-speed express, one of Ocasio-Cortez's, trans-Pacific trains is going to head right into this mess pretty soon.
Michelle could head up the trans-Pacific train.
Stop.
Well, the tagline for this is, she's already gone, she just doesn't know it.
That's really good.
Thank you, Charles.
Very well done.
Yeah, thanks. Sometimes inspiration strikes, so let's get into the slides. I'm really interested to hear what you've prepared for us today.
So it happens, this is, of course, the day before tax day. We're going to close talking about a little bit about that later on. But as it happens, Hillary announced the second time she announced, I think, on April 12th, 2015. So 4 years ago, she officially announced that she was going to do a gigantic belly flop. She didn't exactly say it that way, but
it's the world's slowest slow motion train wreck.
Exactly. After the first time she announced, and people may forget this, that back in 2007 and before that, the approach the Clintons took was, Hillary's inevitable. Don't even think about running against her. They tried to freeze everybody out, and they were really aggressive. There are a lot of newspaper accounts and other accounts of the way in which people like Begala and others would more or less threaten other Democrats and say, and donors, say, look, she's going to be the president, and you do not want to screw this up.
Well, who is Begala? Is he a news guy or something?
No, I think he's some kind of political consultant. And along the line of Mark Penn and Doug Schoen, those type of guys. But he's been, and I forget if he had an administrative post or not with the Clintons, but I
think he did.
Yeah, he's been long involved with these people, and I think with well, they call them progressives, but I don't think he's very progressive. I think he's just an old school demo fat cat, which is what we're, a new phrase that we're trying to popularize here. So 4 years ago, she tried her second time. I don't think at this point it's possible for her to mount an effective primary run, although who knows, she may be thinking that all these people who are in a circular firing squad now are going to shoot each other, figuratively.
I don't think it's possible for Bill to effectively mount a primary. Sorry, Charles.
You are, oh man.
Anyway, sorry, let me stay focused here. They were such a disaster on stage. Anytime Bill spoke, she was looking at him. People should watch that video on patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and see. Hillary is looking at him when he's speaking. I almost wanted to put word bubbles there like, I am going to kill you. She looks like so ready to strike.
Bill, you know who one of my idols is? Lorena Bobbitt. Sleep well.
We got like a slowdown happening here.
Really?
Keep going.
Okay. So what I'm here to report is that information, not just the shows that we've done, but there's a huge volume of information in the public domain that I'll make a simple prediction here, that neither Hillary Clinton, nor Terry McAuliffe, nor Michelle Obama, nor Bernie Sanders, nor Elizabeth Warren will ever win the election in 2020. And on that list, depending on how Trump and the Justice Department decides to move, more than one person on that list will be in prison. That's the way I see the future. Now,
that would be great.
What could change that is if we have a gigantic financial crash, and suddenly these people are hooting and hollering for AOC and the flavor of the month. If we had a big crash, you could see support for Trump erode, and you could see us shift very far to the left, and you could see Trump and his people being much more cautious. But absent that, I think we're on a jail time express here, and we'll get into the specifics in a second. So we can go to the next one. Jason, I see your viewership is growing, which is fantastic. And so some of the new viewers may not know that this is really this is an interactive approach here. This is not just Jason and me and Dr. Corsi and others lecturing you what you should do next. We love your comments. We get a large number of comments and suggestions. We try to incorporate them into these shows. But in this case, there was a bit of development that Jason alluded to, and I think upon reflection, and people have had a chance now to look at it, that there is new information in these emails. We're going to talk about it in some depth in a few minutes, that are linked to indexes up on WikiLeaks. And we would like to encourage, and when we get to this slide, we'll talk about the specifics. We'd like to encourage members of the Crowdsource the Truth community to pay particular attention to that slide and indulge us by going into these indexes, specifically the Clinton emails index, and think about what you know of various topics, and there are many, many of these emails, and whether the versions we see up there are different. My quick takeaway, not having looked at even 10% of them, is that there is a lot of new information in the supporting emails, not the indexes, but the supporting emails.
But Charles, WikiLeaks put out a tweet saying that, I'm not really able to find it here.
It's on the slides later on,
Okay.
I'm saying. But before we get there, Jerry there was a time when he was on Fox News a lot. If we hit that video, he was on Fox and Friends, this one here, Friends This Morning, and he'll be covering some of the ground with us that he covered on Fox and Friends, where he talked about what to expect with the Mueller report. And it's nice to see Jerry getting back on Fox. He used to be on a lot, and then he was frozen out in the Obama years.
Oh, really?
And now he seems to be on, multiple times per week.
Trish Reagan likes having him on.
Yeah, yeah. And there he is.
Yeah, he's looking well.
And his book, of course.
Right.
So we have a link there for people on our slides, so people can watch this at your leisure, and maybe we'll go back into the...
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've also put Jerry's Twitter feed down there, so people who want to follow him can do that and contact him via Twitter. You can do it. He's very good, actually, at trying to respond. Mm-hmm. And I guess our playlist, Jason, is now up to, this is the 155th show.
Wow. It's
And-
hard to believe, Charles.
I know.
Seems like only yesterday.
Yeah.
155 shows here, and people can really get to all of them quite easily if you just click on the playlist on the main YouTube channel, which you can find by searching YouTube for either Crowdsource the Truth or Jason Goodman. We've got every episode of Sunday with Charles, and Charles Ortel is closing in. The show's on temporary hiatus while you write the book, the Wednesday
Right.
closing in show. But if anybody's missed any of these, this is a really convenient way to watch them all. Over 18,000 views of this playlist alone, and as you pointed out, Charles, the viewership is rapidly approaching 82,000.
That's right. And that's just on this channel. Then on
Right.
Crowdsource the Truth 2, I think you got another 10 or so. So you're
Yeah.
closing in, as it were, on 100,000.
Right, and if people want to watch on Crowdsource the Truth too, they can use Super Chat over there and give 30% of their money to Google.
So what we try to do here is we're pitching these presentations to, in the hopes that they will reach governments around the world, and we have been successful in doing that in many, many countries. I'm hopeful that as things fall into place here, as more and more charities are exposed, and as this Hollywood scandal and college cheating scandal takes shape, and more fraud cases are exposed of all types, that the authorities will indeed turn their attention to this mess and view it as an opportunity in the US and in foreign countries to get money back. There's a lot of money back. There's a lot of money in the hands of donors, private foundation donors to these frauds that I believe, and lawyers believe, and people tell me, can be recouped by governments that make a decision to say, now wait a minute, we were defrauded here, and from Bill Gates and from other big Rockefeller Foundation and other donors like that, we donated money because we saw your active involvement in these various programs, and we assumed you'd done due diligence, and we now want our money back. And some of these players, Gates and others, do operate in many countries other than the U.S., so it's not going to be so easy for them to say, well, screw you, government of France, screw you, UK, we'll do what we want. We're an American charity. It's not going to be so easy for them.
Got to be Sarkozy to do that.
That's right. No, he's still under, I believe he's out of prison, but he's in legal jeopardy.
Wow. Well,
So this is this conservative treehouse is something, I don't know if people watch that in Sundance very carefully, the site. We're going to start seeing a lot of information on this whole process. We're going to go over the ground of why were 3 applications before the FISA court denied in 2016 before they ultimately got one across the line. What was the rationale for denying them? What representations were made in those? And beyond the minutia and the detail of that process, why do we need this type of a court today in 2019? I can understand back in the immediate aftermath of the events of 9/11, I can understand why people would throw constitutional protections to the wind, because we did not then understand the nature of the enemy we faced. But I think we need to go all the way back over this ground and ask, is there a better way to do this than to set up these courts which effectively give the security services, the FBI and the DOJ, amazing power that it would seem was used corruptly to the disadvantage of many people, including possibly the sitting President of the United States. I mean, we cannot say, I don't want to hear about, think of all the investigations that stop plots that, we can't tell you about.
yeah, exactly.
Right? No, that's not a strong argument. So
Well, it's interesting though, Charles, because when September 11th happened, I think a lot of people had this, well, I'm not doing anything wrong, so I don't care what they spy on kind of attitude. And then, of course, constitutionalists and smart people were like, that's a slippery slope. And here we are, 18 years later, in action. Dr. Corsi will be with us at 4 o'clock to give us some firsthand insight into how the abuse of this type of thing can affect your life. And they're still abusing it. Morons in Congress like Gerald Nadler are insisting that irrespective of evidence and investigations, he wants all the information.
Yeah, I mean, that's to me, that's really an amazing set of stupid arguments. I mean, he's saying just because they decided not to prosecute for a crime, that doesn't mean we can't look at impeachment. Now, Gerald, did you remember the concept? You impeach somebody for high crimes and misdemeanors. We've decided not to prosecute him for crimes that are below the level of high crimes. So it stands to reason that there are no high crimes and misdemeanors to consider, because if there had been, they would have prosecuted. So this is just, this Nadler guy is constantly on, the lamestream media, and, his sense of his narcissism and his sense of importance are so overblown, and the guy's a freaking idiot.
Charles, a lot of people were kind of making fun of Alex Jones when he went on to the Joe Rogan show and he was talking with Eddie Bravo about interdimensional beings. But I do think Jerome Nadler has proven that's true. He does not exist in a dimension that we all consider reality, because when Candace Owens was responding to a question by saying that Democrats think that black people are stupid, this idiot, who is stupid, yelled at her, and he told her, "You can't call a member of the committee stupid." And Candace Owens said, "I didn't say that." So Nadler, you're out of your mind.
Yeah, he really is. So there's another one from Conservative Treehouse here. Mark Meadows, I guess, likes to do interviews everywhere. But it would appear, and this would make sense to me, that people like Meadows and others would know more of what's going on than we, ordinary people might know. But it would appear that we're on, finally, a freight train here, where a lot of people have been interviewed. This Horowitz report's coming out, other reports are coming out. And what the Clintons and others have been trying, the Obamas have been trying to do, is just to get this mess to a place where, in my opinion, once the really damaging stuff comes out, they can say, well, this is old news. We've been talking about this forever, and there's nothing new here. The fact that the FISA process was abused, and people's freedoms were abused, and that after Trump won, there was all this unmasking of sensitive information that made it very difficult for the Trump. That's all old news, and if it were a problem, it would have been prosecuted long ago. You can see, what's his name, Shifty Adam Schiff and others, ramping up their rehearsals for that kind of argument. But I sense that there is going to be a massive treasure trove of information coming out, unrelated specifically to what we're doing, and more focused on the abuse of the FISA court, more focused on the fact that it would seem the Obama administration was indeed spying on an opposing political campaign.
I heard from Adam Schiff that's a conspiracy theory.
Oh, right. Yeah, he would know. He would know. So on the success of the recent Clinton event, I saw this story.
Oh, this was great. This is all about Howie. I
Right.
love it that Maureen Callahan in the New York Post said that only a heckler can improve an evening. They should be paying Howie more than they paid Paul Begala.
What is that outfit? I mean, I'm no fashion expert, and I like blue as well, but I mean, what the hell? How do you let somebody out of the house looking like that?
Well, this is her Captain Pike outfit.
I know.
Remember where it's the guy from Star Trek who's just a head inside
I know.
It's Hillary Clinton.
Remember after she lost, when she deigned to speak to people, they both came out wearing purple, and now they're coordinated
right,
in blue.
Yes.
It's silliness. But this story is on Drudge now. It's been on Drudge since this morning.
Yeah.
And multiple other, I think, news organizations are writing stories about this story.
Good.
So this is.
That's good. I mean, Howie is thrown out of there and maligned in a way that I find very unfair. As I said, he's just trying to raise awareness and let people know what Bill Clinton is all about, and doing something like that when the mainstream news isn't going to cover what was going on Epstein Island and why Jeffrey Epstein got like an 18-month sentence for raping multiple underage girls. I think we need activists like Howard Kaplan to call it out and get it in the news and raise people's awareness of what is actually going on. So props to Howie, that was well done.
Yeah, we'll go, this link in here, the degree to which Google and Facebook and Twitter, and now it seems Amazon, are abusing their control over the news flow, their control over the information flow and data flow, the degree to which they're mining information that you give away, we all give away for free, to their immense benefit, possibly in defiance of numerous laws. It is an area that I believe, and I'm not really a huge fan of Congress digging into regulation, stuff like that, but we need to ask ourselves, when we see these examples of how quickly people get just booted off the internet and maybe marginalized by the small number of banks that controls a disproportionate share. I mean, this to me, the power that social media has in league possibly with elements of the deep state, is an area that is certainly not a good place to be, whether you're a Trump supporter or you're a Bernie supporter or, God forbid, a Hillary supporter. This does not seem to me to be an instrument maximizing social utility. Instead, it seems to be a control mechanism, an enrichment mechanism for politically connected left-leaning progressives in the main, and intolerant people.
Yeah.
And to the extent that this should have an educational element to it, we don't need intolerance.
May I share something with you, Charles?
Sure.
So people may know, people who are subscribed to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth or subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth will know that I do a regular show with Ole Damagard that you can only get on those subscription channels, because last year we did an episode about the Parkland shooting, and it got removed for the vague harassment, threats, and cyberbullying policy, because Ole had pointed out that someone involved with that whole thing had a relative who was somehow involved with the government. That's what we believe. So the interesting thing is, I got this email 2 days ago from YouTube saying that the team has reviewed the content and they've taken it down. I got a strike. But this video was removed over a year ago and I didn't put it back up. So I don't know how I could get a strike for the same video that's already been removed. But it did make me think that something is afoot at Google, and if people should turn on Crowdsource the Truth one day and find it not here, they may have to go to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth to escape the chilling grip of Google and YouTube and some of the very same people you're talking about who are doing weird stuff to control the internet.
Yeah.
Not good.
Not good at all. And then this, we have our friend Ted Malloch has contributed to our new friend Jim. He's a regular contributor to Jim Hoft's stuff, but he's bemoaning the fact there still is no Brexit. And it's almost as, in England, as if, you know, they had a referendum and then they, what is that? Yeah, still no Brexit. That they had the referendum, the people voiced their desire to leave, and the boffins in the UK said, you know, we the people in a referendum? Are you kidding me? You know?
Why bother voting at all?
Yeah, and it's just, this has been so poorly handled in my mind. It's just, it's a commercial at this point for why you should not set up a business or an investment firm in the UK. I mean, if they can't honor the will of their own people, they're certainly not going to advance the interests of Americans trying to do business from a UK base. And, you know, this is real. I've spent in my life a lot of time in the UK. I like it there. But as far as investing in the UK, forget it right now.
Yeah, that's troubling.
They got to get their house in order. Now, this story is on ABC News, which makes me wonder about its veracity.
Always broadcasting crap.
Exactly. But now they're laying down this idea that maybe the Trump administration, Bolton and Pompeo, are secretly getting ready to launch military action against Iran. Now, I certainly hope we are not going down that type of a path, because we didn't do so well in Afghanistan. Afghanistan has a small number of people compared to Iran, which I forget the exact number. I think it's closer to, it might be 75 million people or more. It's a much wealthier country in terms of, for many reasons, than Afghanistan. And we certainly have had limited internal involvement in Iran for 40 years. So the notion that we would have allies in Iran who can help us, the notion that this is something that we should try because we screwed up in so many places after, pick a year, 79 or 2001, we do not have much positive to show for the amount of money that we spent around the world. And I mean this as no disrespect to the brave fighting forces around the world, but it was an ill-considered move to go against Iraq, in my judgment, and many other people's judgment. And what the hell got us into Libya? And Libya is now in disarray yet again. And we'll see how long the peace.
Hillary got us into Libya.
Yeah, well, okay.
There's a lot of money over there.
That's right.
Charles, don't you think? I mean, I agree that ABC and particularly what's his name, Stephanopoulos, are pretty unreliable.
Stephanopoulos.
Yeah, the guy. But this whole thing where they designated Iran's military as a foreign terrorist organization does sort of seem to correspond to what this headline is saying.
Yeah, but I mean, I'll go back to base principles. I mean, I think the founders, we need to respect the Constitution. This isn't just, the way this works is not the way Bill Clinton and Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and others seem to think it works. You don't get to be president of the United States and then, once you're president of the United States, say, well, it's Constitution, it's old, doesn't matter anymore. We'll do things the way we want to do it. One of the reasons the founders were insistent that the House of Representatives would be the body in which war would be debated is because they had been through so many brutal wars. Most Americans don't study, for example, the English Civil War, which went for quite a while, 1620 odd to 1648 or 9. Sorry, I have that wrong. It went from 1640 to 1660. It's a long period of disruption, and many of the founders' families had been bloodied by maybe both sides of that Civil War. So people looked at the idea of this new country going to war, particularly far away from our vast continent, as something that maybe we shouldn't just rush and do. And also back then, people felt that America would be relatively insulated from any foreign invasion, given the distances and realities. So I think if we're going to do something or think about doing something in Iran, it has to be as part of a long public debate as to the pros and cons of what is our mission and what are the milestones and what are, when do we get out and how do we get out and what constitutes winning. We have not had enough of those discussions. We rush pell-mell into Iraq. We rush pell-mell into Libya under Obama. Our military is now spread all over the world in many, many places on many, many missions. And I disagree with John McCain that, that America should be the world's policeman forever. I mean, I don't understand that decision at all. We are 328 million people. There's 7.5 billion people on the planet. We should bear our, more than our fair share, but we can't be this small nation of 328 million, the first people who then absolutely have to send sons, daughters, children in harm's way to defend, let's say, the Croatians, or just pick a country.
Well, I think he was also being disingenuous as usual when he said that, because it's not necessarily even about being the world's policeman so much as it is the United States, particularly in the case of Libya and other countries, just going and blowing up whoever they want indiscriminately and taking their stuff. That's bad. We got to stop that.
That's not good.
Not good.
So Zero Hedge has this piece about Japan, and it is quite alarming to look at the example of Japan. And many people in the audience may not be familiar with the position Japan held in 1989 when their stock index was up at like 40,000, the Nikkei. Today, 30 years later, Japan's stock index is less than half of what it was at the peak 30 years ago. The population is declining, even including many people who are immigrating into Japan, Lord knows why. You've got the Fukushima radioactivity issues inside and around the country and around the world. You've got a massive debt. You have a structurally crazy amount of money being spent on government. And you have this absurd situation where the number of elderly people above 55 or 65, is ballooning, and the life expectancy of these people is increasing, yet they're not having any children.
Well, I was going to say, has Fukushima or any of the radiation stuff affected birth rates or birth defects or anything like that?
Well, I don't know. The Japanese stuff started way before. I'm sorry. The population decline started way before Fukushima. But there's an imbalance when you get a population that has a very low number of young people aged, let's say, 0 to 24, and a very high number of people 55 and up. And then what you have in the middle, the most economically active people are speaking, I'm not making a qualitative argument, but the people who spend the most money, invest the most money in doing pursuits that will create other jobs for people.
Yeah. That's an interesting caption, isn't it? I mean, I don't know how they could tell from the phone.
A Japanese man, probably a virgin, carrying a waifu pillow. What the hell is a waifu pillow?
I guess this character.
Yeah. And look at the look of the person next to them.
He's dressed as waifu.
But then look at that look. It's like, what?
This is why people aren't having kids.
Yeah, that's right, Exhibit A.
This guy's like, whoa, I better move. Oh, Charles.
So, yeah, and it's really sad to see that. I mean, Japan is the third largest economy in the world. But it's in deplorable position. And this issue, though, this demographic problem I was talking about is particularly poignant in Japan. But globally, the same thing is happening. I mean, the population control mob and the abortion mob, on the one hand, is pushing people to have fewer and fewer children. And, you know, I don't know what the right answer is. I think couples should come together and make their own decisions about how many kids they have. But in my personal experience, you know, having the joy of raising 2 young children, watching them, there's very few joys that are greater than that. And if you only have 2 children as a couple, you're going to have flat population growth. Right. To have population growth, sustained population growth, you're going to have 3 or more kids. And why is that all important? The way society is organized, it's not as if we're all, on farms these days, and farmland's scarce. I mean,
this isn't a farm?
It's an unusual farm. It's an electric gadget farm. But people are now primarily concentrated in cities. In many countries, even relatively crowded countries, there's a lot of space. We're way away from a place where we don't have enough of basic essentials to survive as a community of nations. And so I think it's irresponsible, frankly, to encourage people to for population to decline. And it's very difficult to reconcile declining population in rich countries with the notion that you should have very high stock prices. Because if you're having negative growth in your population, and your population is aging, how do you defend these hockey stick projections that say more and more people are going to be buying more and more goods and services? It doesn't make sense. So
unless it's healthcare and cemetery plots,
right? And we don't really need. And Bill, of course, we all love our children, but Bill wants this diarrhea queen and the 18-year-old Rhodes Scholar to govern global health. I don't think that's a good plan.
No.
So
is that good?
Not good. Now, this one was an interesting one. We have a lot of threats that people argue are such that we ought to drop everything and attend to them. But there's a new threat that's highlighted in Zero Hedge today. I don't know if that's the right thing.
Oh, was that? Did I hit the wrong one?
Yeah. Maybe you didn't. Let's see. What's it?
Crimp growth globally?
No, next one. Oh, I was going to. This is fine. I was going to highlight. Zero Hedge had another story talking about how the Earth's magnetic force was weakening on an accelerated basis.
And I thought you were going to show the trailer for the new Star Wars movie. I was like, how's that a threat? Yeah. Looks good.
And then apparently this story came out early on suggesting there are all kinds of outages. I don't know if this is true or not.
I hope people are watching us on Facebook now. I'm not getting any indication that it's out. Although the streaming server did say there was some issue with streaming to Facebook, I don't think we're having that problem right now.
good. But again, these are companies that really didn't exist in some cases as recently as 10 years ago, and suddenly they're instrumental forms of communicating around the world. And how are we sure that the information that's transmitted over these media are not being used for nefarious purposes? Who's mining all this stuff? Are the regulators up to the task of mining any of this?
Well, how about securing it against outside manipulation?
Yeah.
All kinds of concerns.
Yeah. And so now we're going to turn to talk a little bit about Assange. I mean, on the one hand, there's been a lot of negative press against Assange. Maybe some of it's deserved, maybe it isn't. On the other hand, though, when David K. Johnson, or whatever that guy's name, breathlessly announced on Rachel Maddow, just as the election, I forget if it was during the election, before the election or after the election, that he had someone had sent him a copy of Trump's income tax returns, and they immediately published that in the Times. That's okay.
That was illegal too.
I mean, that's totally okay, because it's, the people have a right to know, is the argument there. And it's almost as if, you have a certain color over here that's bad and another one that's good, and, just when you see that color, then the chorus says, oh, this is really bad, no matter what it is. And you see that other, oh, it's the same behavior, really good. Exactly. People aren't that stupid.
It was really upsetting what they were saying at that Clinton event about Assange, like how it couldn't happen to a nicer guy, that he got arrested and everything. It's like, you realize you're speaking with two of the biggest criminals ever who have been directly responsible for the mass murder of like an entire population in Libya for no good reason.
And Haiti.
The rape, the rape of multiple women, and maybe Assange helped then Bradley Manning, now Chelsea Manning, hack a DOD computer, which is not good. If that allegation is true and he assisted in the hacking, that part is not journalism. And I mean, it's not the same as Daniel Ellsberg in the New York Times and the New York Times versus the United States. If the New York Times stood there and gave Daniel Ellsberg a crowbar to break into the CIA, that's a little bit more like helping somebody hack to publish it. So I don't know the facts of the case, but that's the allegation, that he assisted in cracking the password, right?
Right. So the subject of Assange is front and center, and we've got Jerry on in 14 minutes, I guess. So we can do this next slide in that time, and then we'll do Jerry. So what happened was, if we hit this master file link here, this index was highlighted.
Sorry, one thing, Charles. Look at the number of shares. It's just a coincidence.
Yeah. So this index was highlighted, and I don't know if we can make it slightly smaller or not, or move it this way. So one of the items on it is the Clinton emails. And the question is, see, this Clinton emails has a date stamp, 8 October 2018. You see that? Whereas most of the others are 1 January 1984, and I'm not a computer expert at all, but I was interested. I had never looked at this index before, but...
Well, wait a minute. See, the fact that they're all 1 January 1984, 101, this, I think, is a Macintosh thing. Like, remember they had that ad for the Apple Macintosh where it's the woman running and smashing the screen? I think this is the earliest date that is like the default. I don't know, that looks like some sort of error to me, but look, it does stand out that some of these are, this is some sort of mistake or deliberately changed, I would say.
Yeah, but it's just interesting that this one, this is the Clinton email one here.
Yeah.
And that's 8 October 2018. So, and here's one after 14 September, I don't know what CMS is, but I decided I'd take a look at this Clinton email thing, and if we go back into the slides, let's see. First, well, let's put up. This is what WikiLeaks said about it. That, after all the hubbub, they put this thing up saying, "This new file is not a release. It's not an insurance dump, or a response to Assange's arrest." Okay, now that may be true, but I believe that the emails that are now linked to these index are not the same versions that came out prior to the election in 2016 in certain important cases. You remember back then we had Secretary of State related emails came out, I want to say in the spring of 2016. DNC emails came out before the Democratic convention in July of 2016, and then additional Podesta emails came out starting in October 2016. So, and those are the ones that created all the hubbub. Some of these emails we're going to show you in a second that I've found so far, and this is where I'd like to encourage members of the Crowdsource the Truth community to dive in and look at this. If we hit this link here, you can see, if we just scroll down the page here, there's a large number of links, and I only have looked through a few of them, okay? But, and once again, now this is defaulting to January 1st, 1970
Yeah.
for some strange reason. I don't know
Well,
what
maybe
any of that
that's a
means.
Windows thing.
Yeah. But what all I did is I said, well, I'll just hit a few of these links and see what pops up. My interest in all this is that when I was watching this avidly in 2016,
I just clicked the README thing. It says this directory contains raw data obtained and used by WikiLeaks to create searchable archive.
Good, and then so we can use that searchable archive again to look at that. But when I was looking at this back in 2016, I was struck by the fact that there were very few emails and very little information concerning the all-important period of 2009, when Hillary was just going in as Secretary of State, when there must have been amazing confusion and panic comparing the lies that were told in the MOU concerning the status of the Clinton Foundation with the reality that it was basically bankrupt, illegally organized and operated, and a total disaster that had to be reorganized. There were very few emails back and forth on that period. And what I noticed when I started just patrolling through these emails is I suddenly began to see emails that I did not remember seeing before. So if we go into, doesn't mean that they weren't out there before, but if we go in here, before we get into this issue, the FBI vault here, they're now up to 31 parts in this Hillary R. Clinton thing. And if you can go into page 3 of this, this is the all-important summary for the doubters here, page 3. It says that she was using HR 15, we can make it a little smaller, thank you. HR 15 at My Singular BlackBerry, then HR 15 at ATT BlackBerry. Then in January, she stopped using HR 15 and started using ClintonEmail.com, which we've shown you was created on the 13th of January 2009. So that's the date that she made it through the committee to be Secretary of State, but not sworn in by the approved by the full Senate.
It's also significant that we let people know that, BlackBerry server is controlled by AT&T. ClintonEmail.com is controlled by Hillary Clinton. So if she's doing something for convenience on AT&T and Congress says, hey, AT&T, let's have a look, AT&T would give it.
Right. It's a great point. And so here it says she began using HDR22 at ClintonEmail.com. Right. This is the FBI did not recover any information indicating that Clinton sent an email from her ATT BlackBerry net email after March 18th, 2009. So the issue arises, what if Hillary had additional email accounts beyond this HDR22, and how many other people were using ClintonEmail.com? Go to the videotape into the slide. What we see here, this is, if we hit this one, and I remember the big brouhaha about this one here is HR15 at blackberry.net, but when we look down to the second page, okay, she's sending an email on the 23rd of
Who's Colin?
Colin Powell.
Oh, right.
And this is, I hope to catch up soon with you. What were the restrictions on your use of a BlackBerry? President Obama has struck a blow for Berry addicts like us. All right. Any advice you have for me? All the best to you. And his wife's name is Alma. Right?
Ironic use of the word blow. We can ask Dr. Corsi about that.
Right. And you'll see here the response back from Colin Powell is love Colin. Now, if we go into the beginning of the first page, just so you see.
Within this.
Yeah. I mean,
Right.
this. I do not remember seeing this. Maybe it was circulated before the election. But here's Colin Powell basically saying, you know, how he got around the system.
Right.
And if you go in the third paragraph, it says, there is a real danger. If it is public that you have a BlackBerry and government, you obviously made just a typo there, and you're using it, government or not, to do business, it may become an official record and subject to the law. Okay, I don't recall seeing the body of this email in the news media at all. And he's talking about how he would, you know.
Well, that's explosive. I agree. I don't recall hearing anything about it. She said previous Secretary of States did it, but I've never seen this detail on it.
And to me, this is now maybe crowdsourcers. You can prove me wrong, and I'll happily eat some crow next week on this. But I think this might be an example of a version that was disclosed. And here you see this was declassified on the 8th of September 2016. So it could have come out possibly prior to the election. But this would be an example of something that I think I certainly would have been even more convinced that we need to make sure Hillary Clinton never served as president of the United States if I had seen this before the election. I think this is a highly material piece of information. And you'll recall that Colin Powell endorsed Hillary Clinton, a nominal Republican. He endorses Hillary Clinton. So, and they made great hay of that in the election. So this is interesting to me. Then if we go back into the slides, we find when we hit this, why was she using HROD17 at Clinton email? Well, look up here, HROD17, June 6, 2009. Okay, this is not the email address that the FBI was apparently studying.
Right.
And how many other emails like this, might we have missed? And how many other addresses does she have? You see this here. She's interacting with Cheryl Mills and Dennis McDonough and Nora Toiv, whoever that is, and they're trying to figure out how to talk to one another. But shouldn't they be talking on secure devices? And this you'll see. This was declassified December 31st, 2015.
We forgot what this B5, B6 means about redaction.
There's a code for that. We could look it up. Crowdsourcers could look it up. They actually reveal what this is. So here's an example of something that was declassified December 31st, 2015. People in the FBI should have known that Hillary Clinton, and let's think about that for a second. Yeah, she was using an email address that's not contemplated by the Comey report.
Oh, Lordy.
Yeah. So
no sensible FBI director would actually investigate this, Charles.
Right. So if we go in, because I'm now mindful that we're almost going to rope Jerry here in a second. The final one here, we look at the Sid Blumenthal link. Now, Sid Blumenthal was radioactive. He had been, told that he couldn't have anything to do with it. Here we have HDR22. They're using that one correctly, November 13th, 2009, but it's uppercase. Maybe that doesn't make a difference. If we look down the page, though, here's an example of a confidential memo that Sid Blumenthal is sending to Hillary on November 12th, 2009. And, there are many examples of these, not just on Afghanistan. I've only looked, as I said, less than 10% of the information, but I see quite a few Sid Blumenthal memos going in 2009. I see a memo where Sid is interacting with Doug Band. How Doug will help us get around these restrictions on Sid doing any work with the State Department. I see emails from Diane Reynolds, which is Chelsea Clinton's fake name in this dump. And so there's a large number of these things that to me seem new. I could be wrong. I also think the redactions may be different. And I would encourage people to join me in the exercise, Jason and me, in the exercise of figuring this out. Here we have Jerry.
It's coming on now, yes. Okay.
So with that,
Hello.
we'll maybe...
I'm right here.
Hello, Dr. Corsi. We are live right now. Delighted to have you with us. Can you hear both Charles and I okay?
I can hear you fine. Charles, how are you?
Pretty good, Jerry. Happy Palm Sunday.
Happy Palm Sunday. And how am I coming across? Okay?
Yes, you sound
Video
great.
good?
You're looking
Good.
well, Doctor. Good to have you on the show again.
You're looking very movie starish.
Very movie stars?
Dr. Corsi,
that's unlikely to happen.
you've survived the Mueller investigation, and it's really important for us to have you on the show today because there's so much talk from really dopes in Congress like Gerald Nadler and Adam Schiff, who don't seem to care at all about your constitutional rights. They don't care at all that you were basically wrongly accused and abused. They still want your information released.
Well, first of all, I think the congressional hearings, I've had requests from both the Senate Intelligence and the House Judiciary, and we've supplied documents. I don't know what they're going to do about testimony. The key development right now is going to be the release of the Mueller report. This Mueller report, I think, is going to come out this week from everything that's been announced. Mueller said really the middle of the month, and that's actually tomorrow. And certainly this week would be middle of the month. I thought it could have come out on Friday. But at any rate, I don't expect there's going to be any major surprises. I think, first of all, it's going to be consistent with what Attorney General Barr released as the summary, 4-page summary, which was, by the way, signed off by Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. And so therefore, if Rosenstein signed off on it, the summary, and was there from the beginning, actually appointed Mueller, and has hardly been pro-Trump, I think the full report is going to be consistent in that there's no Russian collusion whatsoever that was found, and the evidence of obstruction was so iffy that there's no, basically, no recommendation to do any charging. So the report amounts to a declination. In other words, after over 2 years and who knows how many really millions of dollars, Mueller found nothing. And Donald Trump didn't obstruct it. Mueller completed his investigation without being having the plug pulled on him. But for my case, I think the writing this book, Silent No More, was really one of the better things I did to save myself from getting indicted. And it was, the prosecutors were really furious at me and wanted to indict me, and were determined in November, right around Thanksgiving, that they were going to do everything they could. I fully expected to be indicted right then.
Well, it was really great that you were able to avoid that.
There's the book right there. Thanks. You've got it on the screen there. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's been doing very well. It's right now about number 4,000. I was on Fox and Friends this morning with Ed Henry, talking about the expectations for the Mueller report, and I think it's as I pointed out, when you read Silent No More, you'll find out that I really broke the whole collusion argument because the Mueller team was so convinced that I had connected to Julian Assange and that I had connected Roger Stone to Julian Assange. This was their whole argument. It was going to be, Donald Trump to Roger Stone, to Jerome Corsi, and I was going to connect them all to WikiLeaks so they could collude on the release of the Podesta emails to do the most damage to Hillary in October 2016, except it didn't happen. I didn't have any connection with Assange or WikiLeaks. In the last 20 hours, as I really detail in Silent No More, this was they were abusive, aggressive. They were, prosecutors were furious, thought I was lying. I just wouldn't give up a name because in July and August 2016, when I was in Italy with my wife Monica and the family for our 25th wedding anniversary, I recall I figured out that Assange had Podesta's emails. I had time to do it, time to think and put the pieces together. And of course, the FBI was obviously, or the NSA, who knows, monitoring my phone calls and emails. And I told this to Roger Stone from Italy in July 2016 in August, and told others that I thought Assange had Podesta's emails, that he was going to drop them in October, that it was going to be a drip by drip, use of the emails over a period of days, which would really do damage, maximum damage to Hillary. And I had a pretty good guess as to what was going to be in a lot of the emails. And the FBI and Mueller's team thought it was impossible that I was so precise and so correct as a guess or an estimate or a deduction, however you want to put it. But I say I connected the dots, and they say I'm lying, that I must have had a source. And when they couldn't get me to lie or create a source that I didn't have, and they threatened to indict me over all this, I told them, go ahead and indict me. I've done nothing wrong, and I, have memory mistakes. They allow me to amend my testimony, but I never intentionally and willfully gave them information on something I knew to be a material fact, that I knew it to be false, the information, to deceive them. I didn't do that. I forgot emails constantly.
Doctor, this whole entire thing that you're describing, it's really one of the most complex games of lawfare that the general public have ever seen revealed. How they're trying to entrap you into admitting something that you didn't do, use that admission to get somebody else involved, and then go after the president with all that.
Yeah, I mean, it was, if I can, this is the book right here, and I want to read a couple passages out of the book that just give you an idea of what kind of strain we were under. I mean, let me just find one of the passages here and starting one of these chapters. I said, this was, I was feeling I was having nightmares. And, last night, this is November 18th, 2018. I'm saying last night I was plagued by nightmares that caused me to sleep very poorly. Felt chest pains intensifying, the tightness making it difficult to believe. I began to fear I might have a stroke or a heart attack. And so this is the kind of pressure, I'm determined to tell the truth of my horror story, inquisition at the hands of the politically motivated Mueller special counsel investigation, even if it kills me. Well, I wrote that in real time. I mean, I was writing that as it was happening, almost like a journal. And as you read this, you can see the pressure that they put me under, and how I tried to explain to them how I came to these conclusions, how I really put the dots together. But they didn't want to have any of it. They really were. It was all about Assange, Roger Stone, Assange, Roger Stone. That's really all they wanted to know. And let me see if I can find quickly another passage here I want to read you in terms of when we went back. It was kind of round two. My heart fell when David Gray, who's my attorney, called me to explain that Mueller's special counsel had scheduled me to appear a second time before the grand jury. This was Friday, November 3rd. So this is all happening in November before Thanksgiving. David informed me we would have to leave for Washington on Tuesday, October 30th, because Rhee, Zelinsky, and Goldstein, the three prosecutors, wanted to meet with us on Wednesday and Thursday to prepare for the grand jury testimony. And I said my reaction was we were headed to disaster. I said I felt exhausted after the first round. Why couldn't Zelinsky and company please be satisfied with the first grand jury testimony? They had all they wanted, but that they wanted a second grand jury meant that they were determined to get me on the record disclosing who my source to Assange was. Since I knew I didn't have a source, I could see that the nightmare would continue. This round, I expected Zelinsky would be even more granular, demanding I remember more and more details about 2016. The more I thought about 2016, the murkier my memory became. I could no longer distinguish between what I actually remembered from what I remembered today as the way I wanted to remember it, or maybe the way I reconstructed 2016 in my memory given all that else that has happened in the 2 years since. See, I felt like I was caught as a character, not taking drugs, but in a Hunter Thompson Fear and Loathing novel. Well, this time I had the fear that Mueller's henchmen, the loathing. I was becoming increasingly convinced I was being punished for writing books like The Obama Nation and Where's the Birth Certificate, as well as Unfit for Command in 2004 that I co-authored with John O'Neill, the Swift Boat book against Kerry. So, I mean, that gives you an idea of how much pressure I was under from the special counselor to tell them what they wanted to hear.
It's amazing. Here's a thought experiment, Jerry. I know you may not want to go back and work in Washington, D.C., but maybe it's time to get the president to turn the tables here. You are the one who can connect the dots. The FBI doesn't seem to do a terribly good job of that. Maybe we should put you in charge of the FBI and convene a grand jury and get some people to go after these Jeannie Rhee, who was representing the Clinton Foundation, and the partisan hacks who I think, when the full story is told here, and I hope it will get told, I hope Donald Trump will not back off and the Justice Department won't back off here, when the full story is told of how close we came to being pushed off the precipice of going to a nation where you're not innocent until proven guilty, where the government abuses its power to target people. That story needs to be told, and there needs to be some rebalancing here, don't you think?
Well, I think there definitely does need to be. I mean, the reality of the Mueller team is they came up nothing. They had a hypothesis that was made up out of whole cloth, namely this Russian collusion. And first of all, I think we've got to find out where it originated, whether it originated in Hillary's team, whether it originated from our intelligence agencies or maybe the British intelligence agencies. At any rate, it was totally not true.
Yeah.
And no matter how hard they tried to press people like me, but they wanted me to plead guilty to one count that was the first day's memory mistake. And here's a letter. We included a letter that David Gray wrote to Zelensky and the prosecutors when I had this, was trying to decide whether or not to take this plea deal. And David said, over the course of 6 voluntary interviews, Dr. Corsi could not testify that he was ever in touch with WikiLeaks, and he could not identify any Russian collusion. He did testify to wanting to do nothing with Assange and WikiLeaks. While this is in a sense true, I understand that this plea to making a false claim is predicated on the fact that Dr. Corsi had emails and phone calls wherein he was in fact interested in WikiLeaks. He had not had the benefit of reviewing all of his emails prior to the interview, and you graciously allowed him to review his emails and amend his statements, which he did. Now, after various amendments to his statements, Dr. Corsi is being asked to affirmatively state that he lied to FBI agents. The issue is that the statements that Dr. Corsi made were, in fact, the best he could recall at the time. From the beginning, Dr. Corsi immediately provided all of his computers, emails, phones, social media accounts, etc., and his intent was always to tell you the truth to the best of his recollection, which he admitted to you was not very good as these events took place years ago. And secondly, in this letter, they pointed out, now, so first of all, to take this plea deal, I was going to have to go before a judge and God and plead to a crime I did not commit. When the first day's memory mistakes, when I'd forgotten emails that Roger Stone had wanted me to send someone in London like Ted Malloch to see Assange, and I was willing to do it. But Malloch never did go to see Assange. And also this point, Dr. Corsi has a securities license, which he will lose as a result of this plea, because I'd be a criminal the moment I went before a judge and took this plea deal. And I know that Ms. Rhee opined that since the plea deal would be under seal, then Dr. Corsi would not have a duty to report the conviction to his broker-dealer. However, in researching the issue, I think Dr. Corsi cannot keep this secret from his broker-dealer, as the law requires him to disclose the plea to the broker-dealer. Dr. Corsi considers the recommendation that he commit a crime to be rather curious, as you represent the Department of Justice. Therefore, the Office of Special Counsel is requiring Dr. Corsi to refrain from stating anything to his broker-dealer unless and until the plea is unsealed. Then I must either ask whether your office can provide immunity to him in the event the broker-dealer or FINRA, that's the regulatory agency, a federal regulatory agency, raises the issue of failing to report a material change, the plea agreement, a material change in a circumstance which should prevent him from holding a securities license. Not reporting this as a potential violation of law.
Well, doesn't that make abundant sense? I mean, isn't Jeannie Rhee, isn't she the one who represented the Clinton Foundation, which, you know, we've gone on and on and on for now 155 broadcasts, 2 hours average, that doesn't believe in telling the truth to any government about the true state of its affairs? I mean, I think the more I think about it, you know, the abuses that you've suffered and the trammeling of the law that the Clintons have done, you know, with impunity for so long, with the express, I would guess, or possibly just the implied approval of the Obama administration, that's a tale far worse than Watergate, and it really needs to be fully exposed, Jerry.
Well, not only that, Doctor, your passage from the book that you've just read us raises a very interesting question. Since these people are willing to, you know, invade the privacy of your family members, and they're now wanting to reveal your personal information, isn't it possible that this suggestion that you do something illegal could have been yet another trap to get you in jail even for more time?
Well, I think that's the reason why David Gray pointed it out to them, is that, you know, this needed to be brought forward, that I, first of all, was going to have to lie, and second, to, you know, admit to before a judge and with my hand on a Bible before God that I committed a crime I knew I did not commit. Then I was going to have to violate these securities regulations in order. So, you know, only a criminal would give you a plea deal like that.
They're forcing you to be a criminal by doing it.
To join the club.
Yes. Well, I think the idea then, Doctor, would be that they'd have such leverage over you, and that's what they were trying to get, right? There was even a short time where it appeared they might be trying to rope Charles into this with an FBI interview, etc.
They definitely try to break you, and they try to intimidate you. I mean, they said if I did not take this plea deal, they would indict me in Washington, D.C. with a jury that would hate me, and they would seek multiple charges, criminal charges, with the intent to be able to sentence me to 25 years in prison. Now, I'm 72 years old. That would be a life sentence. And to even resist that, I'd have to spend probably a couple $1 million in legal fees, which I don't have, and I'd probably still lose. That, not, you know, to say the least, of not being able to work in that period of time. I still have no job. I have no monthly income now as a result of all this. But the point is, if I didn't agree to take this plea deal and plead to this one count, which they said, then you don't go to prison, well, then my alternative was they were going to indict me and try to put me in prison for 25 years. So, and, you know, Monica, my wife, woke up one morning and she said, I'd rather visit you in prison the rest of your life than have you not be the man I'm married. And I thought that was the critical turning point for me. I could not imagine myself swearing I committed a crime I didn't commit. Now, there's Monica, and, you know, so that we've been married now 28 years. And this was an experience that just rips apart the whole family. I want to read you one more because it's on Charles's point. One more paragraph. I couldn't believe this was happening to me, especially when I thought about the fact that under deep state control, justice was no longer blind. In fact, a double standard of unequal justice was the norm of Democrats. When James Comey was FBI director, Hillary Clinton aides got immunity deals before talking to the FBI. This included Cheryl Mills, Hillary's longtime attorney and confidant, and reached down even to Heather Samuelson, a Clinton staffer turned legal assistant who had worked on which State Department emails Hillary planned to designate as personal. Politico reported in 2016 a long list of Clinton associates who got legal protection from prosecutors before talking to the FBI. This list included Brian Pagliano, the Clinton IT staffer who set up Hillary Clinton's private email server, Platte Rivers Networks engineer Paul Kambata, who erased Hillary's email archives, and John Bentel, a State Department tech officer, who advised subordinates never to discuss Hillary's email servers. I wanted to tell David Gray the only plea deal I would accept would be an agreement by the prosecutors I would not be prosecuted for anything. That I knew was not going to happen. You know, the more I thought about what Mueller was offering, the more I realized what a terrible deal it was, nothing more than a trap. I realized that Mueller was so convinced that going to federal prison at 72 years old was an unbearable nightmare for me, that he calculated to deny me First Amendment rights as a citizen and as a reporter, to cut me off from earning a living, and to end my book writing, speaking out against the deep state criminals that I am convinced include Mueller and his prosecutorial henchmen. The Mueller Special Counsel Office now appeared to me as a critical part of the continuing CIA, DOJ, Clinton-Obama coup d'etat that stunk to high heaven, covering up even a murder at its core. That's Seth Rich, which I go into next. But the point is, the prosecutors said they would not necessarily sentence me for a year, which means I'd go into a judge in November 2018 and plead that I was a criminal to this one offense in order to not have to face trial. Then I'd still not be sentenced today. It wouldn't be until November this year, 2019. All that time, if I did anything the prosecutors didn't like, they could say, well, when we get to the sentencing, we're going to recommend you violated the terms, so we're not going to recommend no prison time, like they did with Manafort. And I'd be under their control. They could put a ring in my nose, and they lead me around. They would say I was a criminal, a liar, and then they'd get me to force me to admit who knows how many other things. And if I had broken the report we're getting now today from Mueller would have been fundamentally different. They would have said collusion, not no conclusion. That's why they spent 40 hours with me. That's why they tried to break me as hard as they tried to break me.
Now, Doctor, you've told us about that interrogation, and it's been discussed that the tactics that they use, regressive memory, all the psychological techniques, those aren't even allowed in Guantanamo Bay to be used on terrorists, yet they were used against you, an author, a journalist, a PhD. And, you know, Doctor, while we're speaking, I want to remind the viewers of Crowdsource the Truth that they can go to Corsi Nation and support you by clicking on the donate button. It's very important that everyone supports Dr. Corsi. What he's revealing to us right here is how, I mean, people may say we're conspiracy theorists for talking about this deep state, but you are a firsthand witness to this grotesque abuse of the Constitution, grotesque abuse of your rights, and irrespective of what people think about the books you've written or the journalism you've done, I think everyone needs to be very concerned about this because we just can't have this type of abuse going on. Anyone could be a target.
Yes, and they have everything about you. They have an 8-inch book thick in front of them with all your materials, all your emails. I'm convinced, and this is part of the reason we've now sued Mueller for $350 million in federal court. These techniques were abusive, and I want to find out if I was under NSA surveillance and for how long, or FISA surveillance. Was I included in that, that fishing expedition? A couple more points on being questioned. In one of his outbursts, and Zelensky would get angry, act up, yawn, pretend he wasn't interested. I'm in a closed-in conference room, in unmarked FBI building in Southeast Washington. The FBI picks us up at the hotel, David Gray and myself. We come into this building through the garage. In a safe room, you give up your phones, your computers, all electronics. They bring you upstairs to a interior conference room with no windows, no clock. There's a conference table, and on one side of the conference table, in files, one side is David Gray and me. We sit in the middle of, the conference table facing the wall, and they come in. The prosecutors come in a group. The 3 prosecutors from Mueller's team sit directly across from David Gray and me, and then they're flanked by 6 to 9 FBI. And you can't leave this room without being accompanied by the FBI, even to the restroom door. And you're questioned for hours on end. So in one of his outbursts, Zelensky insisted we would not find my, quote, source to Assange in my phone records or emails. If this were true, I wonder how Zelensky imagined I was in touch with this mystical source. By smoke signal? So why was Zelensky now? He'd given us 6 pages of my phone records. I didn't have my phone records. Verizon wouldn't give me my phone calls by the people whom I called. Why was he so sudden ready to give us phone numbers unless he planned somehow to trap me? With these phone records, Zelensky was going more granular, a realization that worried me as I began anticipating the hard-driving, detailed questions coming from the prosecutors on every phone call they considered important. Well, I went through that whole process. We still couldn't find anyone. They went to see everybody. The FBI went to see everybody that I was in touch with in 2016 and 17. They have on this particular date, October 5th, when this was preparing for when Assange did release the emails on Podesta, and it was at the same time the Billy Bush tape was coming out. Well, I was writing an article on Mark Turry, who was a gun dealer. Well, I'd photographed Perkins Coie, law firm in Phoenix. That was very interesting. Maybe I was working with Hillary Clinton's law firm. Well, actually, Mark Turry they were his attorneys. I also had phoned Judge Napolitano to discuss the case because I quoted Judge Napolitano in an article I was writing. There were 2 sources I had in Texas, the Moriartys, and they were the source of many of my articles on Libya. But I subsequently learned that the FBI went to visit the Moriartys and questioned them for 3 hours about whether I was connected through them or in any other way to Assange. This all the work that they did. This was all the work they did to kind of push me, to break me. I mean, eventually my mind was mush after all of this. And the whole thing blew up. They said, we're only interested in the truth. Yeah, well, that's fine. What do they mean by the truth? Because when I told them what I thought was true, they said they didn't believe me.
They were only interested in their version of the truth, Doctor.
Yeah, I mean, look at the questions. This is the kind of, I took these right out of David Gray's notes, and these were the kinds of rapid-fire questions. What did Roger Stone understand about your relationship with Julian Assange? Well, but why don't you ask Roger Stone? I can't tell you what somebody else's frame of mind is. What conversations were you having with Roger Stone after July 22nd, 2016? Let's go back to Stone's email of July 25th. Send somebody to see Assange. You passed on to Malik. Prior to this email, what reason had you given Stone to think that you would get to see Assange? Did you and Malik ever discuss Nigel Farage or any of the others in the United Kingdom involved with Brexit? Were these people a channel to Assange? As far as Roger Stone was concerned, did he think Malik would produce? Did he think Malik would go to see Assange? Have you told Roger Stone your assessment that Malik had one of the best Rolex contact lists of influential people worldwide? Did you tell Stone that Malik was politically connected in the United Kingdom? Now, what reason did you give Malik or Stone to believe that Malik would go to see Assange? I mean, that kind of questioning after a while, and they go over the same ground over and over again, so that when they basically try to get you to give slightly different answers, which they can then compare. Here's one about Charles. This was the fraud with the Clintons. I said the problem with detecting the Clinton Foundation fraud was the fraud required an expert ability to read audited financial statements. The skill required the expertise of someone like Charles Ortel, a well-respected Wall Street financial analyst. For the average person, understanding the full magnitude of Clinton's crimes that they had perpetrated through the shell game of the Clinton Foundation was difficult, if not impossible. Okay, and so while I had doubted Assange would think the Clinton Foundation, this is a whole other, they went off on a tangent of did Assange have Clinton Foundation material? And he really did not. He had Podesta emails.
Doctor, it sounds like they're running interference for the Clintons, wanting to know what you know.
No question they were.
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton's fingerprints were all over this.
Wow.
And they hated me. They wanted me to admit that I was their source to connect Roger Stone to Assange, and that was the basic connection they wanted to make. Well, they finally kind of just gave up, and Jeannie Rhee lectured me on my religion. She thought that by saying, that God inspired me and I had a miracle in my mind that I knew Assange had Podesta's emails. I said, well, Miss, Rhee, I don't appreciate you ridiculing God, but if you are asking if I figured it out on my own, the answer is yes. And then listen to this one. I mean, this is the, Zelensky, when he's finally given up and angry at me, said, Dr. Corsi, you live in a different world than we do. In our world as lawyers, there are facts. There's also true and false. We are able to distinguish truth from falsity, and we do that on the basis of facts. Your world is very different. I've read your books and studied your emails, but also listened to all my live chats on CorsiNation.com. You are very skillful at taking a fact from here and a fact from there, then you weave them together in a lie that you're also very good at getting millions of people to believe. So again, they were attacking my books, my writing, etc. And I tried to explain to Zelensky that when I had been working my way through college, I worked in public relations, and I had been one of my mentors was Edward Bernays, who was the father of public relations. I told Zelensky, Bernays had a phrase called engineering consent. It meant the job of public relations consultants were to construct facts, so the public could see the value in the proposition or products being advanced by your client. So, when you work when he works in this world of black and white facts, or at least you think you do, Bernays understood the principle of public relations was to influence public opinion. And I also write in the book that when Zelensky was giving me this 20-minute lecturing, it made my mind go back to the Bible, to Matthew 18:37-38. And those are the verses where Jesus Christ is being put on trial by Pontius Pilate before his crucifixion. And Pilate asks Jesus a very important question that I think is largely overlooked in its significance, although it's been studied for centuries, of course. And Jesus answered, Thou sayest, I am a king. To this end I was born, and for this cause I came into the world, that I should bear witness unto the truth. Every one that is of the truth heareth my voice. And Pilate answered Jesus with the famous question, What is truth? So I write, I came to my life to accept the Judeo-Christian Bible and Jesus Christ as the truth. Eventually, Pontius Pilate and Zelensky evidently view things different, that they are the arbiters of the truth. For me, truth is not relative. It derives from God's law. Ancient Greek philosophers termed it the natural law. Every brilliant public relations consultant, starting with Bernays, understood you cannot successfully engineer and consent by trying to sell a lie. My problem was that I resolved I would never lie to please Zelensky, if that's what it took, and I was not going to lie to sign a fraudulent plea deal Zelensky proposed as my only alternative for staying out of prison. If I had to lie, I'd rather go to prison. When Zelensky was lecturing me, I couldn't help thinking back to my first conversation with me when he explained to me that his grandparents had both escaped Auschwitz. As I mentioned earlier, I've been to Auschwitz twice, and the experiences have changed my life. I came to understand the horror human beings are capable of imposing on other human beings. The humans are the wolf to humans, as the saying goes. I wondered how Zelensky's grandparents would feel realizing they survived Auschwitz to produce a grandson who aspired to be the vanguard for Mueller's American version of the Gestapo.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And we can't let this stand unpunished.
Well, I agree, and I think the first steps I'm seeing with Attorney General Gray, and I'm going to be very
Barr, you mean?
Barr, I'm sorry, Gray, another Attorney General.
He's your attorney. Yeah.
In general.
David Gray, in general.
Yes.
I mean, look, I think the main concern I've got is that if this report, they don't redact parts concerning me, since I was not indicted. I think I have a right to have, private information that they may have gathered in their investigation not be made public.
Right.
I think that would be a clear violation of statutes. And I published an editorial last week in the Washington Times making it clear that we would sue if, in fact, that was the case.
But you're talking about your materials, Grand Jury Rule 6E?
Yes, and also other materials that they had as a result of their investigation that came about through these voluntary interviews. Remember, I was there voluntarily. These 40 hours I brought in my laptops and everything else, all that I had. When I got the subpoena on August 28th, two FBI agents showed up at the door, and I was with Monica. We were discussing things late in the afternoon on this day, and we said, "Who's at the door?" And it comes back FBI. Well, it's a pretty frightening moment. We got the subpoena. I asked David Gray, I said, look, could the FBI get a search warrant, break down the door, ransack the house, and take what they wanted? And he said, yes, they could. So I said, well, then why don't we just make it easy? We'll give it to them. I don't have anything to hide. We'll give them the computers. They probably already have it. But they'll have my entire life in 2016, all my phone records, all my emails, tax records, everything else they'll have when they've got that computer. Let them have it. So there's nothing in my life going on 2016, 2017 that isn't in those computers or my email accounts or my cell phone. So we'll give them all of these things. And how can they then say I was attempting to deceive them if we start out this way?
Doctor, it seems that another thing that they've tried to do is to kind of divide and conquer some of your closest allies and business associates and former colleagues like Alex Jones and Roger Stone. I believe I saw a statement from Roger Stone last week or just a few days ago that he wants the Mueller report for his defense. I think it seems at least possible that if someone who is in a personal disagreement with you or perhaps wanting to smear you got their hands on the Mueller report, who knows where that information could go?
Well, we've, with Larry Klayman, my attorney, we've sued Roger and Roger Stone and Alex Jones for defamation. I've reached the point where I'm, having gone through this experience, my patience is very thin, and I'm not about to be abused now by Alex Jones and by Roger Stone, who said some very hateful things. And I've also respected the gag order in Roger's case, since I am person number one in his indictment, and certain of my emails are being used by Mueller's prosecutors to frame the indictment of Roger Stone. I don't have any deal with the prosecutors to give testimony. Prosecutors, when I announced on the Monday after Thanksgiving, I went on One American News, and I announced on live national TV that I was going to tell Mueller to take a hike. I was not going to sign this plea deal. I had not even told my lawyers.
Wow.
They were, urging me to think seriously about taking it. I said, no, I'm not going to do it. So Zelensky called up David Gray, and he said, we'll take it from here. They were very angry. David said, you can anticipate they're going to indict you now. So from Thanksgiving last year until just the St. Patrick's Day, March 17th, we've lived under the cloud that we could be indicted. And, I conclude the book by saying we've become, what our founding fathers tried to prevent us from becoming, a deep state establishment that's determined to destroy the Constitution, deny the existence of God, throw the nation into a global governance system under which we lose our sovereignty. As that's become the USSA, so the USSA, and the United States is Soviet America. So we all face prison now, if only for thought crimes, if Mueller and company are allowed to rule the land. Mueller and company could not care that my wife is crying, that CNN had a black SUV parked outside our home, bothering us and our neighbors, waiting for me to be arrested, or that our friends are calling or hoping that I stay out of prison, destroying the daily peace of our family and our lives. Mueller and company wanted us disgraced as a family simply because I would not give Mueller the answers his henchmen kept drilling for 40 hours in their grand acquisition to get out of you. I'm the one who had to answer the question, is Dad going to prison? I've written this book in the belief that there are enough people left in this country who continue to adhere to the Constitution and believe in God, that Mueller and deep state co-conspirators will be stopped before they complete the transformation of the USA into the USSA. All my life I believe the United States is an exceptional country. I refuse to accept all those who fought, bled, and died to preserve our freedoms as Americans will have done so in vain. In conclusion, I affirm the principle that I strive to live by. In the end, God always wins. And I ask the question, I am with God, are you? And that's how I concluded the book.
Well, I hope it does really well.
Well, I think it's powerful. I want it to be a message where people can really get a clear understanding. I wrote it contemporaneously as to these events going on. I didn't know how it was going to turn out. In some ways, I still don't know how it's going to turn out. But I think that my taking a stand and saying no broke the back of the prosecutors, because I was a linchpin to their preconceived criminal hypothesis that there was a connection with Roger Stone to Assange that allowed for this back end of collusion with regards to the emails.
Yeah.
I tried to tell the prosecutors I don't even think that Russia stole the emails. And then they said, Dr. Corsi, we are not interested in your theories about who stole the emails.
Of course not.
They're not interested
I said, well, maybe
in
you ought to
facts
be.
at all. Yeah.
Maybe you ought to be because you guys are wrong.
Right.
Well, Doctor, it's amazing, and I think the entire country, or at least anyone in the country who cares about the Constitution, we owe you tremendous thanks to you and David Gray and your attorney, Larry Klayman, who assisted you in standing up to this really criminal prosecution on the part of Robert Mueller and his special counsel team. I think instead of being the linchpin, you ultimately became the monkey wrench in their concocted scheme. And thank you for doing that.
And to your families.
Well, it's, it was a decision I don't think I could have made without my wife, Monica. It was really a family decision, because you say, well, maybe I should plead to this one case even though I knew I didn't commit this crime because it'll save the family. And they did bring my stepson to the grand jury, he had a text message Andrew sent me and said he'd scrubbed a hard drive. Well, before we received the subpoena, I had an old desktop computer on my desk that I was not really using, and Monica wanted it for her business. Andrew said, "Can I take it?" I said, "Sure, go ahead and take it." So he did, and he scrubbed the hard drive and he put it to work in Monica's company. Well, I told Mueller, I said, "Well, I've got a complete backup of that computer. Got a hard drive. I brought the hard drive on Trish Reagan's Fox Business show and showed it to the world. Said, it's right here. Mueller wants it. Why don't they come and get it? We can reconstruct everything in that computer from the last day it was used to previous periods."
And you've spoken about that, the Time Machine, which is a backup utility made by Apple Computer. And Doctor, I don't mean to try to presume what you're saying. When you say scrub, probably just a standard format of the hard drive that anyone would do when they were reinstalling a new operating system. No bleach bit involved in this case.
He went through and reinstalled the operating system so that he could...
Standard process.
Standard process.
My father has had me do that to many computers that get handed down.
It's done commonly, and it is not destruction of... It's not the crime of obstructing justice. Destroying evidence if you've got a backup of the computer.
Exactly. And just to clarify for people, because I hear Sean Hannity talk frequently about acid washing the computer, BleachBit is the brand name for a piece of software that does a bit level erase on a hard drive where every 1 or 0 on the hard drive is erased and turned into a 0. The type of erasure that you're talking about is just a standard, very quick procedure that allows you to reinstall the operating system. And frankly, if the FBI or some intensive forensic computer investigation wanted to reconstruct the data on the hard drive that you're describing, they could. Nothing that your stepson had done would have prevented that.
Well, and I was aware of that, but even more precisely, I'd had this hard drive, external hard drive, that was where the application of the Time Machine put the backups of the computer so that they would be separate from the computer. That was, my purpose was so that if the computer crashed, I could, recreate it from the hard drive, external hard drive, and the data on the backup system. The point is that I'd taken precautions. I said, yes, Andrew could have the computer, but look at how vicious this is. Try to penetrate into your family. I mean, go visit everyone I ever knew. I'm sure examine my taxes. Look at everything I was doing in 2016. When they were angry at me, finally just try to find a crime. And, anything they could do to get back at me. I think part of the motivation was to silence me, to, not only get my evidence to turn against Stone and to be used against Trump, proving collusion, and they were convinced I had this tie to Assange, which is why they tried all these techniques. I mean, when Zelensky did the regression, go back, Dr. Corsi, to 2016, you're in Italy, imagine you're thinking about Assange. I think I see a man or a woman. I said, wait a minute, Zelensky. Next thing I know, I'm going to tell you I was, Alexander the Great in a former lifetime. This is the kind of technique that hacks use to bilk people of money who are desperate to know they were somebody famous in a prior lifetime. So the technique's highly suspect, and I'm just not going to do it.
On that narrow point, I might be the person who, I sent an email around to a number of people. I want to say, I forget the exact date, but it might have been the July 25th email you're talking about, because I had seen an interview of Julian Assange in which he said, I have information that will put Hillary Clinton in prison before the election if it gets exposed. That was broadcast on ITV. And I saw that, and I also had reviewed the emails that WikiLeaks had put out. I think they were the DNC emails. And I saw nothing about the Clinton Foundation, nothing about the crimes that you wrote a book about. And it occurred to me a logical thing to do as a news organization would be to get to London and sit down again with Julian Assange And that thing has been used by the FBI. They grilled me about that email. They've grilled you about the email, and many others about the email. Why didn't they watch the freaking interview?
Well, and also, Charles, remember that also kind of coincided with your conversation with James Rosen,
Right.
in which he also indicated that he believed that Assange had information on the Clinton Foundation.
Right.
See, I didn't believe when I was in Italy and I was sorting through this. I figured the Clinton Foundation would come up in the Podesta emails. It had to, but I didn't think that what Hillary had was the Clinton Foundation materials. Remember, July 22nd, 2016, Assange dropped 40,000 emails on the Democrats, and they were all predominantly about Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Hillary rigging the primaries against Bernie Sanders. And the brilliant timing, those were released by Assange as the Democrats were traveling to Philadelphia. So there was no time to manage the news. Everybody was in transit. And that, I think, Sunday or Monday, when the convention was about to gavel down, Debbie Wasserman Schultz resigned. And Assange went on the ITV almost immediately and said, I've got more emails.
Right.
They're going to be very damaging to Hillary. Well, I didn't think it was going to be Clinton Foundation because, Charles, like I just read in the passage in the book, your work was the work that triggered my interest. You came to me about the Clinton Foundation and pointed out that the accounting was completely fraudulent. And we spent hours before I ever wanted to write a book with, me writing articles based on your research. And I feature you extensively in the book. So the FBI knew that I had worked with you and we were, together on this. But I said, the Clinton Foundation emails, even despite all Charles, your efforts, even my book, Partners in Crime, failed to make an impact with the public because the public just does not understand the financial statement requirements and filing statements with the regulators on charities and the rules and regulations. They're difficult for the common average person to, common sense, they're not hard.
Right.
Don't use the money for personal gain if it's a charity. But the proving of a fraud is highly technical. So I thought, when I looked at them, I thought the emails that were missing were Podesta's emails. Because I remember that in June 2016, the Democrats had announced that Podesta's email file had been breached in March 2016. They waited between March and June before the announcement was made. And I figured somebody had Podesta's emails, and it might as well have been Assange. I just turned out to be right. Mm-hmm. My guess was right. Whether that was a guess or a calculation or a deduction, because the FBI said, well, you couldn't put the pieces together to make it necessary. It had to be Podesta. I said, well, I didn't say that. I said, that's where I placed my bet. And I was sure I was right because nothing else made sense to me. And I did turn out to be right. So when I framed these emails to people, I would say things like, word is, make it sound like I had a source. Well, I remember my father when I was, in grade school saying, now, Jerry, when you figure these things out, you tell them to me. Don't go to school and tell them. They're going to think you're nuts. Come here and tell me what you figured out, and we'll decide what to do with it. Because I've had this, ability to kind of it's partly why I wanted always to be an investigative reporter, because I, do like solving these puzzles, which are not always done by pure deduction. There's always an element of intuition, and from studying the people, and it's the Sherlock Holmes rule when all the usual and logical explanations fail, then the others are probably true. That's I've always gone by that and kind of said, well, the others are in the category of what your intuition is telling you is how it really worked. And I was convinced that Podesta's emails were the mother lode and that Assange had them.
Yeah.
But the point was, if the FBI had been able to prove I was lying, that I did have a contact I would have been indicted. They'd have jumped all over that. But they didn't indict me because they knew that the only way they could silence me or put me in prison was if they made me so afraid of what they were planning to do with an indictment that I would take the easy way out and plead to something I hadn't done. But, I thought the FBI was pretty good at, this whole issue of, of doing an analysis of profiling. Well, how did they miss me? I mean, they figured I was old, afraid to go to prison, and would break and easily. I was sitting there writing a book, which they hated. I mean, I said, okay, you guys want to do this. I'm going to day by day, keep a journal, which is going to be a book about what this experience was like, how it felt going through this day by day. And I think this was the kind of thing that, I want to read you one last thing here on this, and then I have a couple comments I want to make about Assange. But I wrote a chapter here, chapter 6, which I said was a hard rain falling, and I had in mind Bob Dylan's song to that effect. I went this one night when I was in the middle of this, waiting for my computer to come back from the FBI after the first days of interviews, and it was a huge rainstorm in Washington, D.C. I was in the Mayflower Hotel. The rain, I'd never seen a rainstorm, and being in Washington, I've probably been in Washington over 50 years, maybe 60 years. I'd never seen a rainstorm like this. And the rainstorm was so bad that I got a cab at the Mayflower, said I want to go over to Morton's restaurant where they have a place where you can smoke a cigar outside. And I said, I'm going to pay you $20 to take me across the street to that restaurant. So he drove up to a light, turned around, and went so I could go into the restaurant without getting completely soaked. And I like rainstorms like this, so I tended to sit out in that porch. It was getting flooded. The rain had been so steady and hard, the drainage system didn't handle the flow. I surveyed the patio and found a table by the door that was relatively dry. Still, the transparent plastic awnings the restaurant uses to keep out rain in the summer and cold in the winter were a failing barrier, flapping in the wind and unable to hold off the rain. And I recalled other storms I'd been through, but this was the worst. And I kept hearing mentally Dylan's classic, 62 song, "A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall." And then I seemed to be at there's a phrase in that, "man with hammers," and I thought those were the prosecutors. After the first encounter, I realized that the goal of Zelensky, Rhee, and others was not precisely to find the truth, but to convict, more precisely, to convict Roger Stone and impeach Donald Trump. They were all Democrats. I felt the most fiercely partisan of the three was Zelensky, but not hardly outdone by Rhee, who was a Clinton attorney. And I knew this night, sitting in that tempest, that a hard rain was going to fall, not just literally here this night in D.C., but also in my life. And I realized that was going to be, that was early on in the experience, but I realized I was going into a nightmare, a Kafka-like experience, and it was going to be very hard to emerge from it unscathed. Fortunately, we did. Help of God, I think we did. And I think our faith largely helped to get us through.
That's great.
Let me say a couple things about Assange before we kind of wrap up. It's the early stages with Assange. I've read the indictment, and I think the indictment is extremely weak because it's predicated on that Chelsea Manning, this has nothing to do with Russia or the Podesta emails or the emails from the Hillary Clinton server or the emails from the State Department. This is about 2010 when Chelsea Manning, who, the U.S. military who was compromising U.S. Computers and getting classified material and giving them to Julian Assange, evidently asked Assange to help her crack a password. Well, even in the indictment, it's made clear that Assange failed to crack the password. So Assange was not responsible for giving to WikiLeaks the thousands of emails Chelsea Manning had stolen, which were stolen without the help of Julian Assange. Now, to have offered to help crack a password, maybe even to have tried, doesn't mean that Assange did. Now, it's like saying that Assange was driving the get-up car to the guys who were going to rob the bank, and he got lost, and they never got to the bank and didn't rob it. Now, did he play a role in a conspiracy to rob a bank? Or, was he humoring them? Did he get lost on purpose?
Good point.
Okay, now also, given the New York Times v. Sullivan, New York Times v. U.S., which is the Pentagon Papers case, this indictment fails to recognize that Julian Assange had a right to publish these documents. We're getting a lot of interference here.
Sorry, it was just should be gone now, Doctor.
Okay. Under New York Times, New York Times v. U.S., 1971 case, Julian Assange had a right to publish Chelsea Manning's materials, even if they were stolen. Now, people say this was doing a national security harm. If you read the Pentagon Papers case, and most people forget about the Pentagon Papers, what they were was Daniel Ellsberg, who was a security consultant to the Pentagon working with the RAND Corporation, stole a Pentagon study called the Pentagon Papers, which proved that going back into the first months of Vietnam, the Robert McNamara, as Director of Defense Secretary of Defense, and Lyndon Johnson and the whole administration and military knew they couldn't win in Vietnam, knew the way we were fighting the war was a losing cause, knew we were lying to the American people, yet we allowed 50,000 Americans to go to their deaths in this war. Now, when the Pentagon Papers were gotten a hold of, Neil Sheehan of the New York Times colluded with Daniel Ellsberg to get a hold of those documents and publish them. And the Department of Defense and the Department of Justice tried to block their publication under the premise that this would do a lot of damage to our national security. And the Supreme Court, 6-3 decision, said that the papers under the First Amendment had the right to publish, because the First Amendment, and I think we're forgetting this today, was meant to protect speech that you don't want to have heard.
Right.
The highest category of that are governments who want to maintain secrets and want to operate under secrets. Why does the government want a secret? Well, for those who believe in the First Amendment like I do, governments want secrets so that they can fight wars that are illegal and lie to the people about it, or do some other nefarious thing that they can't admit in the light of day that they're doing. That is just plain wrong. And I think Julian Assange, by releasing these documents, has an excellent First Amendment defense. And Julian Assange has said repeatedly that he can prove that the Russians had nothing to do with stealing the Democrats' emails. I suggest that now is the time for Julian Assange to say, you want to prosecute me? I suggest Julian Assange fight back like I fight back. Write a book about it. Expose these people. From the beginning, go on the offense. And Julian Assange's attorneys ought to make clear to the public that they can prove Russia had nothing to do with the theft of the Democratic emails. And this will be the second whammy, second shoe to fall. Number one was Robert Mueller, who said no collusion. And now Julian Assange comes down the pike and he says, oh, and by the way, the Russians didn't even steal the emails. Now, Doctor, I think that's a completing argument that this thing has been from the beginning, and complete backup for why Attorney General Barr says, I want to get to the bottom of how this FISA court abuse happened. We get to the bottom of how this happened. That's now the real question. That's the beginning of the counterattack, which I wrote when I wrote Killing the Deep State in 2017. I said there'll be 3 phases. One is Mueller, and Mueller will fail. Number 2 is after Mueller fails, Donald Trump will get somebody in the Department of Justice who will, in fact, turn the tables, and the investigation will go on the deep state criminals within the Department of Justice, the FBI, etc. I said stage 3, which will not happen until the end of Donald Trump's first term, will be the American people realizes this was treason to overturn a duly constituted election for president, to deny Donald Trump the right to be president, and it reaches to the highest levels of the Obama administration and to the Clinton campaign, including the candidate herself and the president himself. And I'm still sticking to that prediction, and I think Assange plays a major role in dropping the second shoe, the second whammy, and he's just been put on stage and given the opportunity to do it. Said if he wants to write, I've never met Assange, I'm not advising Assange, no contact with him. But I said if he wants to write a book, let us know. I think Post Hill Press will be happy to publish it with him. I'm sure we can find him a co-author.
Right.
Or a ghostwriter. Go on the offensive. That's what I did with Silent No More. I said I am not shutting up. I'm not following legal advice to be a good dog. I'm going to write a book and tell the American people what's going on, regardless of what happens to me.
Well, thank you for doing that.
Yes, thank you again for doing that. And thank you for bringing clarity to this Julian Assange indictment. I think a lot of people are hearing a lot of mixed information, and I've only heard about the indictment. I haven't read it, so that's interesting to hear your take on it. What do you think is going to happen next, Doctor? Do you think there's any weight to some of the things people have been saying as far as Donald Trump waiting to do anything relative to, with regard to Julian Assange while the Mueller investigation was going on? Do you think his arrest the other day was motivated by the Trump administration wanting to now get Assange back into the United States? And do you think Assange will cooperate in any way?
I think it was no coincidence. I think when Attorney General Barr said that there was spying,
right,
and with regards to the FISA court, and the Democrats lost their minds again. The next day, the deep state decided they were going to now go in and grab Assange and change the subject. I don't think. I mean, there's a lot of drum beating to go after Assange because he stole national security documents. As I'm pointing out, I think the theft was Chelsea Manning. And I think the publisher was Assange. And I think there's a very strong First Amendment case here under New York Times v. U.S., the Pentagon Papers case. And I think it's very hard to charge someone as an accomplice if they didn't succeed in breaking the password. They just tried to break the password. It's very different, and even under free speech cases like Whitney v. California, which is a bit of a stretch. It's a 1927 case. It's one of the most famous free speech cases. The concurrence by Judge Brandeis is simply brilliant. Judge Brandeis said, if speech by someone on the verge of causing a revolution that has the way to bring about a revolution may have to be taken seriously as a crime. But, a speech by someone who has no audience and nobody's listening is probably not reaching the level of seriousness. Or he said, what if the speech shouting fire in a crowded theater, which was Justice Holmes's first formulation of what you could not do. Well, what if there was a fire in the theater? What if you wanted to bring attention to the fact that the theater had inadequate fire protection? Now is it a crime? What if nothing happened from you shouting fire? In other words, Julian Assange did not help Manning get these emails. He had thousands of them that he published. He's admitted, the indictment admits that Julian Assange did not crack the passcode. So, it's a very, very weak case. And I think what'll happen next is we're going to have an extradition fight. It's going to go on for quite a while. I think Sweden will get back in the case and say, we want to try him for rape. I think other countries like France will say, we'll give him asylum. I don't know why Julian Assange, when he got asylum from the Ecuadorian embassy, didn't just, this was in January 2017 and thereafter, why he didn't just slip out of that embassy in the middle of the night and take the channel across into Paris and have a car drive him to Geneva and declare he wanted asylum. I think 50-50, he would have gotten away with it.
Now, Doctor, what implications do you see, if any, with regard to Barack Obama having commuted the sentence of Chelsea Manning?
Well, again, that makes it. These are all kind of mitigating factors, which have to be taken into consideration as to whether or not Assange, who offered to crack a password and fail, is really a co-conspirator when thousands of emails had already been stolen, and it's unclear whether any more were stolen after the password request was made by Bradley Manning. And the damage that was done there, well, clearly, governments always argue national security damage is going to be done. Clearly, the Pentagon Papers damaged the State Department and the Defense Department and the Johnson administration and subsequently the Nixon administration for waging a war which should never have been fought. John Kennedy knew that. It was trying to prevent it before he was killed. Now, is that good or bad? It's certainly bad if you're the State Department or the Defense Department or Lyndon Johnson. You don't want to be exposed as having killed 50,000 Americans on a battlefield you knew was worthless, and you did it because you wanted to create some military industrial profits for Bell helicopters and others. You don't want that information out there. And similarly with the cables that Julian Assange released from Chelsea Manning, I believe they included even the email that was the secret Podesta trip to Russia that he took in 2009, delivering uranium for Hillary Clinton when she was doing the Uranium One deal, and Mueller flew in on the tarmac, gave the uranium sample over to Russia, got back in the plane 15 minutes later and was in the air, headed back to Washington, D.C. We wouldn't have known about that had Chelsea Manning not stolen those cables and Julian Assange not published them. Did that devastate America, national security interest? No, I think, in fact, the truth would make our national security stronger. It's the lies and the fact that our government thinks it needs lies and security procedures that frightens me as a citizen. Because it only gives them a license. It only gives them a license to be criminals, and that's what they do with this kind of permissions.
In our last few minutes here, let me give you some rapid-fire questions from our viewers, if I may.
Sure.
People are curious to know if the statute of limitations has any impact on these charges against Assange. This alleged activity took place in 2010.
It will, and I'm not sure what the statutes of limitations are on these. I'm not sure what statutes he's being indicted under. The indictment has some vagueness to it. It was a very, very poorly crafted indictment, like the minimum possible indictment you could figure out so that the European countries, including Great Britain, don't argue that there may be a death penalty involved or some other reason why they would not extradite. So it was a minimally written, and I think very poorly written indictment.
Well, actually, the statutes they're being indicted under are on the front page of that indictment.
Okay.
Are they?
Yeah, it's see here, count one, conspiracy to commit computer intrusion. And I doubt that has, 2010 is 9 years ago.
Have a statute of
Yeah, I mean, I doubt that has a, long.
We just have to look up that statute and see what the statute of limitations are. But it's a legitimate question. It could easily have run out.
Yeah, I'll ask.
I would hope. I'm not an attorney, but we could look it up. Hoping the Justice Department lawyers weren't so careless that they didn't think of that issue.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised. Doctor, people want to know when Robert Mueller's first court appearance in your case against him might be. And can people come support you? Will Mueller
Well, yes,
appear?
I mean, my case, Corsi v. Mueller, is now before the Federal District Court in Washington, D.C., and the government has filed a motion to dismiss. I believe within the next 10 days, we're filing our response to that. Then the judge in the case will have to make a determination as to whether the case is being heard or dismissed. I think it's a very strong case, especially after the determination of no collusion by Mueller, and no obstruction. And the facts that we're learning now about the FISA court abuses and that Attorney General Barr is taking them seriously, I think my case is a very strong case, and we'll appeal it right up to the Supreme Court if we have to. But if we can get a district court hearing, we'll get discovery. And that'll give us the ability, in my case, to get all kinds of documents released by the government that they are not going to want released.
Yes, of course, Robert Mueller will do everything in his considerable power to avoid that, I would think.
And so will Hillary Clinton.
Right, right. Well, anything else?
Well, I think, Jerry, you've been very generous with your time. We've had you on for over an hour. We really appreciate that you would take so much time to share your compelling story and your hard-won fight here with our viewership. So we really appreciate that.
Yes,
well, I greatly respect you both. Charles, you and I have been working together for more than a decade on various issues, and Jason, I greatly support your efforts as well. And if you'll give me a section near that I can post on my website of this interview with me, I'll post it on tomorrow on Twitter and on my YouTube channel, and my Facebook, so that people can view this widely and listen to this in subsequent days.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely, Doctor. I want to remind people who are watching right now that they can follow you on Twitter, Dr. Corsi. You're there at Jerome_Corsi. People were asking earlier when you'll be back on YouTube, so that'll be good to see you back on there. The book, of course, is Silent No More. People can get it from Amazon.com, or if you'd prefer to purchase it from a retailer that's not controlled by the CIA, you can go to BarnesandNoble.com and get it there, or anywhere their books are sold. Dr. Corsi has written a litany of New York Times best-selling books, and people can also go directly to his website at CorsiNation.com. You can donate to Dr. Corsi through PayPal and a variety of other online means. Doctor, was there anything else you wanted to share before we...
just that I narrated the audio book and the iTunes. The iTunes is available on the Apple Store, and they're really like a podcast. It's 9.5 hours where I read the book, and I recommend that to people who like to hear books these days, and I wanted to narrate it myself so you get the full impact of me telling the story. The ebook is also available.
Great. And people can also support you on Patreon, right, Doctor? How do they find you on Patreon? It's
again, Jerome Corsi. Look me up on Jerome Corsi. I've got to decide what I'm going to be doing with the Corsi Nation and with Patreon. I mean, it's pretty chilling that the FBI was following and listening to everything. And again, once I've been targeted, I doubt they ever quit wanting to put me in prison. I don't think this ends here.
Right.
And I've still got to deal with what's going on in Congress if we're subpoenaed there, which could happen now. Before Nadler's committee or, before the Senate Intelligence Committee, we could be facing another year of this nightmare and more legal expenses. So I'm hoping it will end, and I'm very pleased that at least to know from whether we're not going to be indicted. We've heard nothing from Mueller since last November, and they didn't give us the courtesy to say they were declining to indict. But with the statement coming out of the Mueller final report, there will be no more indictments. That includes me, and my case is closed.
Good.
It's very good, very good. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us today, and congratulations on this historic victory, really, over brutal anti-constitutional injustice.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you.
Thank you.
Always wonderful to see you, Dr. Corsi, and we'll speak with you very soon.
God bless.
That was great, Charles.
Wonderful.
Wonderful
Was.
Input from Dr. Corsi there.
Take these out.
So do we have more
slides?
We
do have,
okay.
and I'll be very quick
Sure.
to go through them. We've covered this slide. If we go to the next one, this is a really interesting thing that came to my attention in the last several days. It turns out that the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation filed its articles of incorporation at 11:22 a.m. on the 23rd of October 1997. And if you hit this link in here, it should come up. Oh yeah, well this is a source document that tells you everything you need to know. It's dated from 1985, but the logic prevails to this day. It tells you that there are two important tests: an organizational test, is the thing actually organized, and an operational test. We don't need to review this in great depth now, but if you want a lot of technical details, there you have it. I lifted a paragraph here, and it says very clearly that if you have a problem with the Articles of Incorporation, they can't be cured by doing wonderful things with your operations. You have to pass each test.
Even selling drugs?
Even selling drugs, right? Right. What's going on there? So this is the application that the Clinton Foundation made. It was submitted on December 23rd. No, we have to go back.
Oops, sorry, that was a mistake.
Rushing you along here. Right, this is we've shown people this before, this link here.
Yeah, I've got it right here. I accidentally flicked
Yeah,
the thing.
and so this was filed on December 23rd, it was signed December 23rd, stop right there for a second, 1997. And this is the very beginning of the application, right? It's impossible to do what they did here with a real IRS department and a real Department of Justice. You notice here, they can't even get the identification of the entity correct. It says here, put in your address, number and street. Does it say post office box? No, it says number and street and your room. And we'll show you in a second that their address was 5604 Hawthorne Drive, Little Rock, Arkansas 72207. That was their address. Instead, they say, no, our address is Post Office Box 1104. You can't get a post office box for an entity that doesn't have
a business address.
that doesn't have that doesn't have its employer identification number. Right? So here they say in upper two, in this question 2, they say they've applied for this EIN. Well, how do you have a post office box if you haven't got an EIN?
So the post office box is for a person or something?
Most likely for a person. And they give Little Rock in a different zip code. And we've done this before. I'll just remind people, I just want to show you that this application, December 23rd, 1997, is horribly flawed. Okay.
People love mail fraud, Charles.
Yeah, and if we could scroll through it quickly, I'll show you it's signed here supposedly by Skip Rutherford on the 23rd of December. If we get to the Articles of Incorporation, which are attached, it's coming. There's proof that that it was filed. This actually is not the corroborating proof that you would need to show, but this is something coming back. And there you see the timestamp, 11:22 a.m., October 23rd, 1997. Okay? And this says that the people who filed this are the people who were acting as incorporators. They were not the trustees of the foundation. These were the lawyers. This was David Kendall, Nicole Seligman, and a guy last name Tisdale. The lawyers on behalf of this entity filed this thing. So we have no proof yet that there are actual trustees that were installed, that there was an organizational meeting. We just have this document, and when you get into Arkansas law, you'll see the Arkansas law says that the Secretary of State has no obligation to verify that this means it was lawfully organized. So if you keep going quickly through just high points, there's that address, Hawthorne Road, and you'll see signatures in the next page or page after of the lawyers. There they sign it, okay? Then you go to the next page. Now this is giving the power of attorney to the lawyers, and you keep on going. They gave the power of attorney December 23, 1997. Here's the application for the employer identification number, right? They append this, and it shows, you go down the page, it's signed December 23rd, 1997. Okay? So there's proof they did not have it. They're submitting this into the IRS saying, we failed the organizational test. We don't have an EIN. Somehow we got a post office box. We don't even know our address. Most of the stuff in here is wrong. But give us, a determination letter anyway, and let us be a charity January 29th, 1998. Why is this interesting? This time frame, October 23rd, 1997 through January 29th, 1998, is just when the Lewinsky crisis is coming into full bore. Okay? So go back into the slide, because I'm going to do this very quickly because we've been going for a while. The 7 deadly sins that I see here, it operated for 62 days before they had bylaws. The corporation can't operate without bylaws. We mentioned they're not signed by the actual trustees. 62 days without an EIN. We're going to show you in a second that Bill, Hillary, and others directed the affairs of this entity for Washington, D.C. But they never registered this entity in Washington, D.C. So it was not lawfully organized in Arkansas. It wasn't lawfully organized in Washington, D.C. We talked about the post office box. And in this 1023, this application to the IRS, there's no mention of Bill and Hillary Clinton having anything to do with the foundation. They're not listed as creators. They're not listed as trustees, executives, anything. And this language here is drawn from the memo I mentioned. You can't have a formless aggregation of individuals or whatever, sort of putting something together. It has to be a real organization. And just these small things that we're showing you here, I would argue, should have gutted the application. But now let's go to the next page, where it gets really interesting. For the FBI, if you're actually watching this, or investigators around the world, the city of Little Rock has a portal, and you don't need to open this up. It has a portal where there's a lot of incriminating information on that portal, a lot of resolutions, board minutes, proof that the city of Little Rock was conned by the Clinton Foundation. At 4:30 p.m. on the 7th of November, 1997, so this is days after they've filed articles with the Secretary of State, but weeks before they've applied for federal tax exemption, this is Mayor Daley announcing, the mayor of Little Rock, and this is drawn from the records of the city of Little Rock, accessible here, says that at 7 o'clock in the morning that day, Skip Rutherford had been told that President and Mrs. Clinton had selected the site as a location for the proposed William Jefferson Clinton Presidential Library. Well, how could President Clinton and Hillary Clinton select the site for an organization they had no connection to? The organization wasn't organized, they weren't trustees, they weren't executives, and this material fact that they would have selected the site on that day is omitted from the Clinton Foundation 1023, filed December 23, 1997. Okay? Most importantly, at this moment in time, the Clintons owed millions of dollars already to Williams and Connolly, the very law firm that was putting this application in, whose signatures were on here. So was this an exercise by Williams and Connolly to increase the likelihood that they would get paid?
Wow.
And who, in fact, was, can you say that Williams and Connolly had a huge conflict of interest? They were scared that they wouldn't get paid. They needed a vehicle to get money sent towards the Clintons. So they run roughshod over the law, and they, Williams and Connolly, need to be, I think, investigated very closely. Now look, we've had this up before, and I hadn't looked at it until this morning. This is David Kendall, the principal lawyer's biography. And it's actually, it's not funny, it's actually quite alarming. If you look down the page a little bit, start with it. David Kendall has had a checkered legal career.
That's
His acquaintance with right, this is Williams and Connolly. With the legal process began when he was arrested several times, but convicted only once in Mississippi during the summer of 1964 while attempting to register voters. That's what they lead with.
Wow.
So you think about it. So,
this is not a joke site?
No, he's trying to say, maybe he's he's on a do-gooder and whatever.
Honest about being a thief.
But I mean, this should raise some eyebrows. And then if you go further down into it, it talks about all the work, he brags about all the work he's done for the Clintons. So, what are his real interests here? What are Williams and Connolly's real interests here? How come people aren't investigating any of this? He's also brags about representing George W. Bush
Oh boy.
All right? So this is something that needs to be looked at very carefully. If we just go back into the slide.
Only convicted once, Charles. It's better than Devin Nunes' lawyer.
And then, then on 18 November 1997, again, this is less than a month after they file articles of incorporation for the Clinton Foundation, the city of Little Rock says, okay, we're going to give you $15 million. Well, this entity doesn't exist. It hasn't done bylaws, it hasn't had an organizational meeting, it hasn't had tax exemption, you know, and none of this, the fact that the city of Little Rock had committed $15 million to buy land for the Clinton, to prepare the site, is not in the application. That's a material fact that's not in the application. It's not in any subsequent reports to the IRS and other authorities, and it's certainly never explained properly how the city of Little Rock actually got into the business of putting the site together. Who did they buy the properties from? Who benefited from the sales of these properties? Who benefited from the development of this site? How many of those people are tied into the Clintons, both personally and politically? And did the Clinton family benefit for any of this?
Well, I think a better question is how many of those people remain above ground?
Right, exactly. And none of these facts were in that 1023. Now, we've been pushing very hard. We're pressed for time. I want to leave it there, but I will just tell people that there is a mountain of new evidence coming out of this that I have and others have that we're going to reveal. This should have been investigated a long time ago. This is something that Rod Rosenstein and Mueller and Comey should have found when the FBI and DOJ were investigating the Clinton Foundation from 2001 to 2005. This thing should never have been approved as a nonprofit in the horrible state that it was in. And what did they do to make sure that nothing ever came to light under George W. Bush administration? They put Lois Lerner into the IRS as Bill was leaving the Federal Election Commission, as Bill was transitioning out to George W. Bush. They made sure that they had Lois Lerner in the IRS sitting over top the department that might be looking at this, and they made sure that Rod Rosenstein was the tax person in the DOJ investigating these frauds. They made sure that Comey went in and replaced Mary Jo White, and all the while, and they found their man in Robert Mueller to go in and sit on top of the FBI. And if you want to know why Mueller and Comey and Rosenstein have been so aggressively hard against Trump, I think this is part of the issue. They do not want this history going back and being exposed. They don't want the potential involvement of the Bushes with the Clintons in all this, and they're doing their level best. And that's why I would guess they took the extraordinary steps, in part, to go after Corsi. Now, two more slides, and I'll be super quick.
No,
I know the hook is.
I just misunderstood what you.
No. So these are figures, and I'll be very quick on these, Jason, because I know we don't like figures that much in the audience. But this is the total spending of all government, federal, state, and local. Total receipts, total spending, total deficit. Okay. In 2007, our deficit under Bush was $395 billion. The crisis came; it became $852. Obama becomes president, it jumps to $1.6 trillion, where it remains in 10, down to 1.5, then 1.4, 900, 800, 700, 900, 900. Now under Trump in 2018, it's back at $1.2 trillion. How significant are these numbers? People hear trillion and they say, I don't know, that's a lot of money. This column here is the value of all goods and services purchased by 1.4 billion Chinese people each year. So all of the purchases inside China were $1.3 trillion. Yet our government spent just on government, here, just in this country, for $328 million, we spend $4.6 trillion on government. And these lunatics, AOC and others, are, oh, we're not doing enough. I mean, we spend 350% on government of what every single living, breathing Chinese person spends to exist in a year.
Wow.
Okay, don't tell me that government doesn't have enough spending. And notice here that we now equate the deficit. $395 billion is 30%. Our deficit is 30% of Russia's total economic output. It's consumption, it's investment, it's exports, less imports, okay? It's GDP, okay? And notice how our deficit climbs to be in 2009, when Mueller's flying over to Uranium One, in 2010 when Skolkovo starts happening, our deficit is 129% of Russia's total economic output.
Wow.
Right? So how can we look at this and say, okay, Russia's a threat, but our deficit isn't a threat? You know, how do we look at this and say, well, you know, Russia has been destroyed by sanctions. Their total output was $2.3 trillion in 2013, and it's dropped to by 600 billion by 2017. So you look at this and you say, I think the real threat to this country is not Russia, it's not China, it's our deficit and it's our out-of-control government spending. So the last person you want to put in as president, who's somebody like Bernie Sanders, who is economically incompetent. His wife may have gotten off on the education fraud I think they've been operating. The last person you want is somebody who's so clueless that he would embrace socialism, thinking that $6.7 trillion in spending on government is not quite enough. Then if we go to the final slide, and I'll be quick on this, these figures come to us from our government, okay? And this is the total amount of compensation. That means wages plus fringe benefits. So it's a squishy number in that how do you value a public pension, where you might be able to get a pension after only 10 or 20 years work. How do you compare government workers who get pensions with private workers who don't? What this shows is that this is 6.4 trillion is the total amount of compensation of all private workers, non-government workers. It went up to 6.5 in 2008, and look how much it dropped. It dropped by $350 billion in the crisis. That's the total amount of money, compensation. And then it fought its way back, and now it's up to 8.5 trillion.
Oh.
These are the number of workers, 108 million. Obama is fond of talking about how he created 15 million jobs. There's no sign of that in these numbers. Between 2008 and 2009, the number of workers went down by 6.8 or 9 million workers lost their jobs in 2009.
Not
okay?
good.
Not good. Now you could blame some of that on Bush. You could say, look, he inherited a mess, and maybe a lot of that's Bush's fault. But anyway, not that many jobs were created. You look at the total compensation. The workers in the private sector went from 58,600 on average to 73,000. But look over here in the public sector, in the extreme right column. Public sector workers' total compensation has been between 128 and 132% of the compensation in the private sector. Public sector workers are paid, in essence, 30% more, all in, by the government's calculation, than people in the private sector. So why do they need unions? It's ridiculous. You look at this and you say, oh, wait a minute. There's a serious problem. And these figures understate the problem, because what the government's really smart at doing is saying, we will keep the number of official workers low, but then we will subcontract, and we'll let the contracting people rape and pillage and overpay workers, but they'll be counted in the private sector, not in the public sector. So even before...
So this should be higher.
And I've done some of that work. You can go through and you can say, what are the private industries that are likely heavily influenced by the government, and where the government's doing this kind of stuff. Long story short, if you want to make sure that America goes bankrupt in 2021, by all means, vote Bernie. By all means, resurrect Hillary Clinton third time.
You can make hats, make America bankrupt again.
Right. Yeah. By all means, if Michelle and Terry McAuliffe, and remember on Terry McAuliffe that he was centrally involved with this Clinton Foundation. He may have been also centrally involved with the targeting of conservatives in Virginia, and the last person, any one of the names that we put out on that first slide are very bad ideas for the Democrats to nominate in 2020, but we're not here to nominate Democrats. We're not here to help Republicans. What we're here to do is expose this mammoth fraud and corruption and make sure that you, the viewership, have the ammunition you need, the information you need to push on the people who could make a difference here. And let's get some prosecutions going, fair-minded prosecutions of people who deserve to be investigated, prosecuted, incarcerated, and severely punished.
We probably yelled at too.
And with that,
Well, Charles, excellent presentation today. I want to send our thanks to Dr. Corsi. That was one of the most complete explanations of the situation that I've heard so far. A lot of good insights into the Julian Assange situation. I hope that Assange can make it to the United States and be part of testifying against some of these crimes that we're talking about. And I'm not sure if that's on his agenda, but I guess we'll see in the coming weeks and months and years as the wheels of injustice turn slowly.
and if people want to support you,
Well, yes, people should go to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. The entire Evening with the Clintons video is up there for people to view. So if you didn't get soaked by the Clintons for hundreds of dollars to listen to them lie, or well, the only truthful thing he said was that they're selling drugs.
we're selling drugs.
So anyway, hope everybody will go over there. I will see everyone tomorrow. Tomorrow morning we've got also on Patreon, Light on Conspiracies with Ole Damagard. We're going to have special guest Cody Snodgrass, and Ole, Cody, and I will be talking about Julian Assange. And then of course we've got the Moriartys, Unseen Libya, tomorrow night. See everybody tomorrow. Have a great evening.